In the heart of Oklahoma City, Joanna Rangel, 56, lived the life that seemed like it came straight out of a movie. As the heir to a vast oil and gas fortune, Joanna was a well-known figure in the city's high society. With a history of attending prestigious schools, she was not only wealthy but also well-educated and respected. Joanna was married to Frank H. Rangel, a powerful state senator, making them one of the most influential couples in Oklahoma. They had children who looked up to their mother as a role model. Joanna's personality was as bright as the Oklahoma sun. She was known for her kindness, her love for her family, and her passion for the ranch life that was part of her family's heritage. Apart from managing her family's estate, she was deeply involved in charity work, always looking to give back to her community. In the days leading up to her untimely death in January 2000, Joanna was full of dreams and plans. With the new millennium, the world buzzed with excitement, and people everywhere were talking about the Y2K bug scare that turned out to be a false alarm. Amidst this, Joanna was planning to rejuvenate her appearance with a facelift. She hoped this would help her step confidently into the new decade, continuing her public and private duties with renewed vigor. Little did anyone know, this decision would lead to a tragic turn of events that would shock the community and leave a lasting impact on her family and friends. On the morning of January 15, 2000, Oklahoma City was draped in a blanket of gray clouds, setting a somber mood across the town. It was on this chilly winter day that the unexpected tragedy of Joanna Rangel unfolded within the sterile walls of a renowned private clinic, a place where the elite of Oklahoma City often turned to in pursuit of perfection. Joanna, a prominent figure in the city's social circles, had scheduled a facelift surgery, aiming to start the new millennium with renewed confidence. However, what was supposed to be a routine procedure turned fatal. Joanna's life came to an abrupt end on the operating table, leaving behind a wave of disbelief and sorrow. The grim discovery was made by the surgical team itself, led by Dr. Jonathan Humberston, the clinic's top surgeon. The atmosphere in the operating room shifted from professional calm to chaotic distress as the team realized Joanna could not be revived. Among them was Angie Ruth Niles, a young nurse who found herself in a situation no medical professional ever hopes to face. Despite their extensive training, nothing could have prepared them for the shock and immediate grief of losing a patient in such circumstances. Word of Joanna's death quickly spread beyond the clinic's walls, casting a shadow over the city. The community, still buzzing from the recent New Year's celebrations and the global sigh of relief that the Y2K bug had been a non-event, was now mourning the loss of one of its most beloved figures. Joanna's death, occurring in a place where she sought to enhance her beauty, added a tragic irony to her passing and left the city in search of answers. Shortly after the tragic news of Joanna Rangel's death during surgery broke out on that overcast January morning in 2000, Oklahoma City police swiftly arrived at the private clinic. The clinic, known for its exclusive clientele and top-notch services, had suddenly become the center of a grim investigation. Leading the investigation were Detective Mickey Larson and his partner, Detective Sarah Gumbert. Both were experienced officers, but the nature of this case was unlike any they had encountered before. The crime scene was not what they typically faced. There were no signs of a struggle or violence. Instead, they stepped into a high-tech operating room, where the only evidence of something gone wrong was the medical equipment and the lifeless body of Joanna Rangel. Detective Larson, known for his methodical approach, immediately began documenting the scene, taking notes on everything from the arrangement of surgical tools to the settings on the medical monitors. Detective Gumbert, on the other hand, focused on interviewing the shocked staff, trying to piece together the timeline of events. Their objective was clear: to understand how a routine cosmetic surgery could turn fatal. The police collected various items for analysis, including syringes, vials of medication, and the records of the anesthesia machine. Every piece of evidence was handled with care, knowing that any could hold the key to unraveling the mystery of Joanna's death. As news vans from local stations like K4 and KWEV crowded the clinic's parking lot, the police continued their meticulous work inside. The investigation into Joanna Rangel's death promised to be a high-profile case, with every detail scrutinized by both the authorities and the public. In the wake of Joanna Rangel's unexpected death, the focus of the Oklahoma City Police investigation quickly turned to Dr. Jonathan Humberston, age 48. As the surgeon who performed Joanna's facelift, Dr. Humberston was at the center of the tragic event. Known as Oklahoma City's premier plastic surgeon, he was a familiar face in the same high society circles as Joanna. However, Rumors had been swirling about his struggles with alcohol, casting a shadow over his professional reputation. Dr. Humberston's background was impressive. He had attended some of the most prestigious medical schools in the country and had built a successful practice in Oklahoma City. His dreams were as big as his achievements. He aspired to be recognized as one of the best plastic surgeons nationwide. But beneath the surface of his professional success, there were whispers about the pressure he faced and how it might have led him to seek solace in alcohol. When detectives Larson and Gumbert sat down with Dr. Humberston for questioning, they encountered a man who was both defensive and visibly stressed. He insisted that Joanna's surgery was routine and that he had performed similar procedures countless times without issue. Yet, his demeanor fluctuated wildly during the interrogation, swinging from anger to moments of profound silence, as if he was grappling with the weight of the situation. The police were keen to understand every detail of the surgery, from the preparation to the moment things took a tragic turn. They questioned Dr. Humberston about his actions and decisions in the operating room, looking for any signs of negligence or malpractice. The interrogation was thorough, leaving no stone unturned, as the detectives aimed to piece together how a procedure meant to bring joy ended in sorrow. As the investigation continued, the story of Joanna Rangel's death began to capture the attention of the entire city. Local newspapers and TV stations were filled with updates and speculations about the case. This tragedy had struck a chord, reminding everyone of the fragility of life. As the investigation into Joanna Rangel's death unfolded, the spotlight shifted to Frank H. Rangel, Joanna's husband, who was 59 years old. Frank was a state senator, well-known and respected in government circles. His marriage to Joanna had united two powerful families, making them a prominent couple in Oklahoma City. Despite his influential position, rumors of financial difficulties and a secret affair began to surface, adding complexity to the case. Frank Rangel was a man of ambition, dreaming of leaving a lasting legacy in Oklahoma politics. However, his personal life was not as straightforward as his public persona suggested. The police were curious about any motives Frank might have had, considering the whispers about his extramarital relationship and potential financial gains from Joanna's untimely death. When detectives Larson and Gumbert interviewed Frank, they encountered a man who projected calm and grief over the loss of his wife. He spoke of Joanna with respect and affection, denying any involvement in her death. Frank's demeanor during the interrogation was composed, even as the detectives probed into sensitive areas of his personal and financial life. He insisted that his marriage, despite any rumors, was strong and that he had no reason to wish harm upon Joanna. The detectives were meticulous in their questioning, aware that the dynamics of the Rangel family could hold clues to the mystery. They examined Frank's alibi, financial records, and his interactions with Joanna leading up to the surgery. The investigation was thorough, leaving no aspect of Frank's life unexplored. The case garnered media attention, and the intrigue of a high-profile investigation, combined with the drama of personal and political scandals, captivated the city. In a time when the world was celebrating the start of a new millennium, the tragic death of Joanna Rangel added a somber note to the year's beginning. On a brisk January afternoon, a week after the tragic death of Joanna Rangel, Oklahoma City police made a significant breakthrough in the case. New evidence emerged that would pivot the direction of their investigation. During a meticulous review of the clinic's security footage, detectives spotted something alarming. Angie Ruth Niles, a young nurse who was part of the surgical team, was captured on camera tampering with medical supplies the night before Joanna's procedure. The weather outside mirrored the chill of the revelation as a cold front had swept through Oklahoma City, leaving streets slick with ice. Inside the warm confines of the police station, detectives Larson and Gumbert watched the footage repeatedly, their seasoned eyes catching the subtle but deliberate actions of Angie. This discovery raised a multitude of questions about her involvement and motives. Armed with this new evidence, the detectives wasted no time. They revisited the clinic, this time focusing on gathering any physical proof that could link the tampered supplies to Joanna's surgery. They collected vials, syringes, and any medications that could have been compromised, ensuring each item was meticulously cataloged for forensic analysis. The police's response to this breakthrough was swift. They knew that this piece of evidence could be the key to unraveling the mystery of Joanna's death. The community, still reeling from the shock of losing one of its most beloved figures, followed the developments closely. Local news outlets were quick to report on the police's findings, adding another layer of intrigue to the high-profile case. In a city that had just celebrated the dawn of the new millennium with optimism and joy, the turn of events in Joanna Rangel's case served as a stark reminder of the unpredictability of life. As the investigation continued, the police were determined to piece together the puzzle, driven by the evidence that had unexpectedly come to light. With the investigation taking a dramatic turn, the focus shifted to Angie Ruth Niles, a 23-year-old nurse at the clinic and a new, critical suspect in Joanna Rangel's death. Angie, who had been captured on the clinic's security footage tampering with medical supplies, suddenly found herself at the center of the police's attention. Known as Frank Rangel's mistress and a key figure in the clinic, Angie's involvement painted a complex picture of personal and professional entanglements. Angie had dreams of moving up in the world, seeing her relationship with Frank as a ticket out of her current life. Her aspirations, however, were now overshadowed by the serious allegations against her. When detectives Larson and Gumbert brought Angie in for questioning, they encountered a young woman whose demeanor oscillated between nervousness and defiance. Her initial calmness gave way to moments of anger as the interrogation intensified, revealing the pressure she was under. The detectives probed Angie about her actions on the night before the surgery, her relationship with Frank, and her presence during the fatal procedure. They were keen to understand her motives, questioning whether jealousy, ambition, or coercion played a role in her actions. Angie's responses were evasive at first, but as the evidence mounted, the facade began to crack, suggesting that there was more to her involvement than initially appeared. As the news of Angie's interrogation spread, the community was abuzz with speculation. Local media, including stations like KWTV and the Oklahoma Gazette, closely followed the developments, providing updates that kept the city on edge. In a time when Oklahoma City was still basking in the optimism of the new millennium, the case of Joanna Rangel introduced a narrative filled with intrigue and betrayal, capturing the attention of a community grappling with the unfolding drama. The investigation into Angie Ruth Niles added a new layer of complexity to the case, as detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading to Joanna's tragic death. With each new revelation, the city watched, waiting for justice to be served in a case that had touched the hearts of many. As the investigation into Joanna Rangel's tragic death deepened, all clues began pointing towards Angie Ruth Niles, the 23-year-old nurse and the mistress of Frank Rangel. The evidence, particularly the security footage of Angie tampering with the medical supplies, was damning. It became clear that Angie, driven by a mix of personal ambition and influence from Frank, played a pivotal role in the events leading to Joanna's death. Angie's dreams of a future with Frank, away from the shadows of his marriage to Joanna, had morphed into a sinister plot. Under the guise of a routine facelift procedure, Angie manipulated the medical supplies, leading to fatal complications during Joanna's surgery. The police, after gathering all necessary evidence and corroborating the sequence of events, moved to make the arrest. On a cold morning in late January, just as the city was beginning to move past the Y2K frenzy and the excitement of the new millennium, Oklahoma City police arrived at Angie's residence. The arrest was swift, capturing Angie by surprise. She had been planning to flee the country with Frank, with tickets booked for a flight to Colombia. However, the police intercepted before their connecting flight to DFW Airport, preventing their escape. Angie's reaction to her arrest was a mix of disbelief and resignation. She had underestimated the extent of the investigation and the evidence against her. Frank, on the other hand, remained silent, his political career and personal life in ruins. The news of the arrest sent shockwaves through Oklahoma City. Local media, including the Oklahoman and News 9, were quick to cover the story, with reporters stationed outside the courthouse and the police station, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. The community, still reeling from the loss of Joanna, found some solace in the swift action of the police. Joanna's family, devastated by her loss, expressed a cautious relief at the arrests, hopeful for justice in the wake of their unimaginable grief. The trial of Angie Ruth Niles, the nurse implicated in the tragic death of Joanna Rangel, became a focal point for Oklahoma City. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the city watched with bated breath, eager for justice in a case that had gripped the community's heart. The prosecution, led by the determined Amy and Clark, a seasoned attorney known for her tough stance on crime, presented a compelling case against Angie. They outlined how her actions, influenced by her relationship with Frank Rangel, directly led to Joanna's untimely death. On the defense side, John J. Mercion, a skilled lawyer with a reputation for handling high-profile cases, argued for leniency. He painted Angie as a young woman caught in a web of manipulation, her judgment clouded by love and ambition. Despite his efforts, The evidence against Angie was overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt about her involvement. The trial was the talk of the town, with daily updates dominating the news. Stations like Coco 5 in the Oklahoman provided extensive coverage, capturing the emotional testimonies in the tense atmosphere in the courtroom. Joanna's family, present throughout the proceedings, displayed a mix of sorrow and hope, clinging to the belief that justice would be served. When the verdict was finally announced, Angie was found guilty, a decision that sent a wave of relief through the courtroom and beyond. She was sentenced to life in prison, a punishment that Joanna's family felt was just, yet they knew no sentence could fill the void left by Joanna's death. The community, while satisfied with the outcome, reflected on the tragedy, pondering the fragile nature of life and the consequences of our choices. The verdict and sentencing closed a chapter on a case that had captivated Oklahoma City, leaving a lasting impact on all involved. As the news of the sentencing spread, discussions about the case continued, with many hoping it would serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of envy and deceit. In the months following the trial and sentencing of Angie Ruth Niles for the tragic death of Joanna Rangel, Oklahoma City began to heal. The high-profile case that had once dominated conversations at every corner of the city slowly receded into the background, leaving behind a community forever changed by the events. Detectives Mickey Larson and Sarah Gumbert, the officers who had tirelessly worked to bring justice to Joanna, continued their service with the Oklahoma City Police Department. The case had left an indelible mark on their careers, reinforcing their commitment to upholding the law and serving their community. They often found themselves reflecting on the complexities of human nature they had witnessed during the investigation. For Joanna's family, life without her was a difficult adjustment. They channeled their grief into continuing her legacy, dedicating themselves to the charitable causes she had been passionate about. The ranch, a place Joanna loved dearly, became a sanctuary for the family, a place where they could feel close to her spirit and keep her memory alive. Angie Ruth Niles, now serving a life sentence, faced the consequences of her actions. The reality of her situation set in as she adjusted to life behind bars, a stark contrast to the future she had once envisioned with Frank Rangel. Frank, whose involvement in the case had shattered his career and personal life, struggled to come to terms with the fallout. His dreams of political legacy and influence were irreparably damaged. The community of Oklahoma City, while moving forward, would not forget the tragedy that had unfolded among them. Local media outlets, including the Oklahoman and K4TV, occasionally revisited the case, reminding residents of the importance of justice and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As life continued in the aftermath of the trial, those touched by the case found ways to move on, each carrying their own lessons and memories of a case that had captivated a city and tested the bonds of its community. The tragic case of Joanna Rangel serves as a somber reminder of the lengths to which individuals will go to reshape their destinies, often with devastating consequences. Michael Marshall Tucker was a 47-year-old man who lived in Pacifica, California. He worked as a software engineer, which means he made programs for computers. He was really good at his job and came up with many new ideas. Marshall was known for working hard and always trying his best. Marshall had a happy family. He was married to Nanny, and they had 2 children. Activia was 14 years old, and Marlboro was 10 years old. The family lived in a nice house near the beach. Marshall loved his family very much and always spent time with them. He often took them hiking on the weekends. They went to places like Maury Point and the Sweeney Ridge Trail. Marshall liked taking pictures of nature, especially the ocean and sunsets. He had a camera and always carried it with him on hikes. Marshall went to Stanford University, where he met his best friend, Nate Harrison. Nate and Marshall stayed close friends even after college. They both worked at the same tech company, which made computer programs for big businesses. In his free time, Marshall liked to read books about technology and science. He also liked watching shows like The X-Files and Star Trek Voyager with his kids. People who knew Marshall said he was kind and helpful. His friends and co-workers admired him for being smart and caring. He always had a smile on his face and was ready to help anyone in need. At work, he was excited about a new project that he thought would change how people use computers. Marshall and his team were working on this project, hoping to present it to the company leaders soon. In the days before his death, Marshall was busy but happy. He talked about the family hiking trip they had planned for the weekend. They were going to visit Point Reyes National Seashore. Marshall was also helping Activia with her science project about marine life. He spent time with Marlboro building a model rocket. Marshall was looking forward to many things. He dreamed of one day starting his own tech company. He also wanted to travel with his family to places like Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Canyon. Marshall Tucker was a good man with big dreams and a loving family. His sudden and tragic death left a huge hole in the lives of those who loved him. On March 23, 2003, the weather in Pacifica, California, was cloudy and cool. At about 8 o'clock a.m., Activia Tucker, Marshall's 14-year-old daughter, woke up and went downstairs to the living room. She was expecting to see her dad getting ready for their planned hike. Instead, she found a terrifying scene that would change her life forever. The living room was a mess. Furniture was turned over, and things were scattered everywhere. In the middle of the room, Activia saw her father, Marshall, lying on the floor. There was blood around his head, and he wasn't moving. Activia screamed and called out for her mother, Laney. Laney Tucker rushed into the room. She saw Marshall and immediately ran to the phone to call 911. Her hands were shaking, and her voice was trembling as she told the operator what had happened. She said it looked like someone had broken into their house and hurt her husband. The police arrived quickly. Officers were on the scene within 10 minutes. Officer Mark Stevens was the first to enter the house. He found Laney crying and holding Activia, who was still in shock. Stevens asked them to step outside while he checked the rest of the house. Officer Stevens noticed the living room looked like someone had tried to make it appear as if a robbery had occurred, but there were too many things that didn't add up. Valuable items, like the TV and Laney's jewelry, were left untouched. Marshall's body was lying near the fireplace. Next to him was a heavy ornate candlestick that was covered in blood. It was clear that this was the weapon used to kill him. The detectives began their work, taking pictures of the scene and collecting evidence. They dusted for fingerprints and looked for any clues that might tell them who had done this. Outside, Laney and Activia were talking to each other. Laney was trying to stay calm for her daughter, but it was clear that she was devastated. Activia was crying and kept asking why someone would hurt her dad. The discovery of Marshall Tucker's body was the start of a complicated and tragic investigation. The peaceful life of the Tucker family was shattered, and the search for the truth had just begun. When the police arrived at the Tucker home on March 23, 2003, they quickly secured the scene. The lead investigators, Detectives Laura Grant and Michael Chua, both experienced and respected, began their work. Detective Grant was 45 years old, with short brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. Detective Chua, 50, was tall and lean, known for his sharp intuition. The living room was a chaotic scene. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and items were scattered all over the floor. It looked like someone had tried to make it seem like a robbery. However, some valuable items were left untouched, which made the detectives suspicious. A flat-screen TV, Laney's expensive jewelry, and a new laptop were still in place. Marshall's body was found near the fireplace. His head was badly injured, and there was blood on an ornate candlestick nearby. The candlestick, a heavy piece from their mantel, was clearly the murder weapon. Marshall's wounds showed he had been hit multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. Detective Grant and Detective Chua started their investigation by looking closely at the crime scene. They took photos and collected evidence. They also dusted for fingerprints on the candlestick and other surfaces. Forensic experts arrived to help, wearing white suits to avoid contaminating the scene. They collected blood samples and fibers that might provide clues. The detectives interviewed Laney and Olivia outside the house. Laney, still in shock, tried to explain what had happened. She said she had been asleep and didn't hear anything unusual. Olivia, who found her father, was too shaken to speak much. Officer Mark Stevens, who was the first to arrive, helped keep them calm and took their initial statements. Detective Grant noted that there were no signs of forced entry. The door was intact, and the windows were not broken. This suggested that the killer either had a key or was let in by someone inside. This made the detectives think that the killer might be someone Marshall knew. The police used special lights to look for hidden evidence, like footprints or blood traces. They also used a device to check for any recent calls or messages on Marshall's and Laney's phones. They hoped this could lead them to more clues about what happened. The investigation team worked through the day, piecing together what they could from the chaotic scene. They collected all the evidence carefully, knowing that each piece might be crucial to solving the case. Marshall Tucker's murder was a shocking and tragic event in the peaceful town of Pacifica. The detectives knew they had a tough job ahead to uncover the truth and bring justice to Marshall and his grieving family. Laney Tucker, Marshall's wife, was the first suspect. Laney was 41 years old, a creative and quiet person. She loved writing adult fiction, especially stories with violent and intense themes. Over the past year, Laney became deeply involved in a fantasy world she created. Her latest story was about a twisted love affair, and her friends noticed that she started mixing up her fantasy with real life. The police found Laney's behavior odd. She seemed distant and sometimes confused about what was real. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought her in for questioning the day after Marshall was found. They asked her about her relationship with Marshall and what she was doing the night of the murder. Laney told them she had been asleep and didn't hear anything. She said she loved Marshall and couldn't understand why someone would want to hurt him. The detectives noticed that she seemed nervous, often fidgeting and avoiding eye contact. They asked her about her writing and if she ever felt like her stories affected her real life. Laney insisted that her writing was just a hobby and had nothing to do with Marshall's death. The detectives also looked into Laney's recent activities. They found out that she had been acting strangely at her writing group meetings. Her friends said she talked a lot about her story and seemed obsessed with the idea of a dramatic and tragic love. Some of them even wondered if she was getting too involved in her fiction. During the interrogation, Laney's answers were often vague. She didn't have a clear alibi for the night of the murders, saying only that she had taken some sleeping pills and gone to bed early. The detectives asked if anyone else had a key to their house. Laney said only she and Marshall had keys, which made them even more suspicious. The detectives also checked Laney's phone records. They found several text messages and emails that showed her growing obsession with her story. One message to a friend said, "Sometimes I feel like my characters are more real than my own life." This made the detectives think that Laney might have blurred the lines between her fantasy and reality. Laney's reaction to the interrogation was mostly calm, but she seemed tired and stressed. The detectives couldn't tell that she was hiding something or just overwhelmed by the situation. They decided to keep an eye on her while they continued their investigation, looking for more clues that could either prove her guilt or clear her name. Laney Tucker's behavior and her intense connection to her fictional world made her a prime suspect in Marshall's murder, but the detectives needed more evidence to know for sure if she was responsible. Nate Harrison, Marshall's best friend, was the second suspect. Nate was 39 years old and worked with Marshall at the same tech company. He was outgoing, friendly, and known for his easygoing nature. Nate often visited the Tucker household and was considered part of the family. He shared Marshall's passion for technology and innovation, and they had been close friends since their days at Stanford University. Detective Grant and Detective Chua brought Nate in for questioning. They wanted to understand his relationship with Marshall and Laney better. Nate seemed surprised by the suspicion but cooperated fully with the police. He told them about his long friendship with Marshall and how they worked together on many projects. Nate explained that he had been at home the night of the murder working on a new software project. He provided the detectives with the name of a colleague who could confirm he had been online, working late into the night. Nate seemed genuinely upset about Marshall's death and couldn't believe that someone would kill his best friend. The detectives asked Nate about his relationship with Laney. He admitted that he and Laney had become closer over the past year, especially as she struggled with her writing and mental health. Nate said he often tried to support her and keep her grounded when she got too involved in her fictional world. When asked if he had any romantic feelings for Laney, Nate hesitated but then confessed that he did have feelings for her. He quickly added that he never acted on them and that his loyalty was always to Marshall. The detectives found this interesting and wondered if Nate's feelings for Laney could be a motive. The detectives also checked Nate's phone records and computer activity. They found that Nate had sent many messages to Laney, encouraging her writing and offering emotional support. There was nothing directly suspicious in the messages, but the frequency of their communication raised some questions. Nate's demeanor during the interrogation was mostly calm, but he appeared anxious at times, especially when discussing Laney. He seemed genuinely hurt by the loss of his friend and worried about Laney's well-being. The detectives could not determine if his anxiety was due to grief or something more. Nate's strong friendship with Marshall and his unspoken love for Laney made him a complicated figure in the investigation. The detectives needed more evidence to determine if Nate's feelings had anything to do with Marshall's murder, or if he was simply a supportive friend caught in a tragic situation. Nate Harrison's deep connection to both Marshall and Laney made him an important part of the investigation, and the detectives continued to probe for more details that could clarify his role in the unfolding mystery. On March 27, 2003, 4 days after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather in Pacifica, California, was rainy and cold. Detective Grant and Detective Chua were at the police station when they received a call about new evidence. An officer had found something unusual while going through Laney's phone records and computer files. The new evidence was a series of emails and text messages between Laney and Nate. These messages were different from the ones the detectives had seen before. They were more personal and hinted at something troubling. In one message, Laney wrote to Nate, "I can't stop thinking about my story. It feels so real. Sometimes I wonder if the only way to end it is to make it real." The detectives felt a chill reading the message. It seemed like Laney was losing her grip on reality. Another message from Nate to Laney said, "If this is what you think has to happen, I'm here for you. Just be careful." This message made the detectives suspect that Nate might have known about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Detective Grant and Detective Chua quickly went to Laney's house to talk to her again. Laney was cooperative but looked tired and stressed. The detectives showed her the messages and asked what they meant. Laney broke down in tears and said she didn't know what was real anymore. She said that she had been so wrapped up in her fantasy world that she felt like it was taking over her life. While Laney was talking, Detective Chua received a call from the forensic team. They had found traces of Nate's fingerprints on the candlestick, the murder weapon. This new evidence was crucial. It showed that Nate had been in the house and touched the weapon. The detectives went to Nate's house to confront him. It was still raining heavily, making the scene feel even more intense. Nate was shocked to see the detectives but let them in. They showed him the messages and told him about the fingerprints. Nate tried to explain that he had been at the Tucker house many times and could have touched the candlestick before, but the detectives didn't believe him. Detective Grant and Detective Chua arrested Nate on suspicion of being involved in Marshall's murder. Nate protested, saying he was only trying to help Laney, but the evidence was strong against him. The new evidence changed the direction of the investigation. The detectives now believed that both Laney and Nate were involved in Marshall's death. They continued to dig deeper, looking for more clues to piece together the full story. The discovery of the messages and fingerprints brought new light to the case, making it clear that the investigation was far from over. The detectives were determined to find the truth and bring justice for Marshall Tucker. Anna Louise Reed was the third suspect. Anna Louise was 24 years old and lived next door to the Tucker family. She was a social worker known for her compassion and protective nature. She often spent time with Laney, offering support during difficult times. Rumors of a romantic relationship between Anna Louise and Laney added a layer of complexity to the investigation. Detective Grant and Detective Chua decided to bring Anna Louise in for questioning. She seemed surprised but agreed to cooperate. Anna Louise described her friendship with Laney and how she often tried to help her through her emotional struggles. She admitted they were very close but denied any romantic involvement. Anna Louise told the detectives she had been at home the night of the murder, reading a book and watching TV. She said she heard nothing unusual and didn't know anything about Marshall's death until Laney called her the next morning. The detectives checked her alibi, looking for any inconsistencies. During the interrogation, Anna Louise appeared calm and composed. She answered all the questions without hesitation. However, the detectives noticed she seemed particularly concerned about Laney's well-being. When asked about Laney's mental state, Anna Louise said Laney had been struggling with reality and often got lost in her fictional world. The detectives asked Anna Louise if she knew about Laney's plans to kill Marshall. She denied knowing anything and said she would have tried to stop her if she did. The detectives found it hard to believe that someone as close to Laney as Anna Louise wouldn't have noticed something was wrong. The detectives also checked Anna Louise's phone records. They found numerous text messages between her and Laney. Most messages were about everyday things, but some hinted at Laney's emotional turmoil. In one message, Laney wrote, "Sometimes I feel like my stories are more real than my life." Anna Louise replied, "You need to focus on reality. I'm here for you." Detective Grant and Detective Chua continued to question Anna Louise, trying to find any clue that might link her to the crime. They asked about her relationship with Marshall and if she ever felt jealous of him. Anna Louise said she respected Marshall and would never do anything to harm him. Despite Anna Louise's calm demeanor and seemingly solid alibi, the detectives were not entirely convinced of her innocence. They believed she might know more than she was letting on. They decided to keep a close eye on her while they continued their investigation. Anna Louise Reed's involvement in the Tucker family's lives and her close relationship with Laney made her a key figure in the case. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to determine her role, if any, in Marshall's murder. On March 30, 2003, a week after Marshall Tucker's murder, the weather was clear and cool in Pacifica, California. Detectives Grant and Chua received a crucial tip from the forensic team. They discovered a series of incriminating messages on Laney's phone that linked Nate Harrison directly to the crime. These messages showed Nate's encouragement and guidance, proving he knew about Laney's plan to kill Marshall. Laney Tucker, 41, was the murderer. She had become obsessed with a twisted fantasy world she created, believing that Marshall's death was necessary to immortalize their love story. Laney's mental state had deteriorated to the point where she couldn't distinguish between fiction and reality. Her obsession with her violent stories drove her to bludgeon Marshall with an ornate candlestick from their living room. Detectives Grant and Chua realized that Nate Harrison, 39, was not just an innocent bystander. Nate had harbored secret feelings for Laney, and instead of preventing the murder, he manipulated the situation to make sure it happened. Nate believed that with Marshall out of the way, he could finally be with Laney. He provided Laney with the means to carry out the murder and helped her stage the burglary scene. The detectives reviewed the evidence and planned their approach. On the evening of March 30, they drove to Nate's house. The sky was clear, and the air was crisp. They knocked on Nate's door, and he answered, looking surprised to see them. Detective Grant told him they needed to talk about new evidence in the case. Inside, they showed Nate the messages and explained what they had found. Nate's face turned pale, and he tried to deny everything, but the evidence was too strong. Detective Chua calmly placed Nate under arrest for his involvement in Marshall's murder. Nate looked shocked and defeated as the handcuffs clicked around his wrist. Laney was also arrested at her home. She didn't resist and seemed almost relieved. When the detectives told her they knew the full story, she broke down, admitting that she believed Marshall's death was a tragic necessity for their love story. Marshall's family was devastated by the news of Laney and Nate's betrayal. They couldn't understand how the people closest to Marshall could do such a thing. The arrest of Laney and Nate brought a mix of grief and relief. They were heartbroken over the loss of Marshall, but relieved that justice would be served. The clear skies of March 30, 2003, marked a turning point in the case. The detectives had solved the mystery, bringing closure to Marshall Tucker's family and the community of Pacifica. The trial of Laney Tucker and Nate Harrison began on June 15, 2003, in the Pacifica Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KTVU and the Pacifica Tribune. The public was eager to see justice served for the murder of Marshall Tucker. The prosecutor, Samantha Klein, 45, was known for her tough and determined nature. She presented a strong case against Laney and Nate, showing the jury the incriminating messages and evidence from the crime scene. Klein argued that Laney's delusional fantasy had led her to murder her husband, and that Nate had manipulated her to fulfill his own selfish desires. On the defense side was Robert Hayes, 50, a seasoned attorney known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind. He argued that Laney was mentally unstable and couldn't fully comprehend her actions. Hayes claimed that Nate's involvement was merely that of a misguided friend trying to help. He emphasized that Nate never directly participated in the murder. During the trial, the victim's family watched with heavy hearts. Marshall's parents, siblings, and children were present every day, hoping for justice. They listened intently as witnesses testified about Laney's erratic behavior and Nate's secret love for her. The emotional toll was evident as they struggled with the betrayal by people they had trusted. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On July 1, 2003, they reached a verdict. Laney Tucker was found guilty of first-degree murder. Nate Harrison was found guilty of being an accessory to murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdicts were read. Judge Evelyn Carter, 55, delivered the sentences. Laney was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nate received a 25-year sentence for his role in the crime. Both sentences reflected the severity of their actions and the impact on Marshall's family. The sentencing brought mixed feelings among the victim's family and friends. While they were relieved that Laney and Nate were held accountable, the harsh reality of losing Marshall forever weighed heavily on them. They felt the sense of justice, but the pain of their loss remained. The trial and sentencing had a significant impact on the community of Pacifica. People discussed the case in cafes and on local radio stations like KGO. It served as a grim reminder of how quickly life could change and the importance of mental health awareness. The story of Marshall Tucker's murder and the subsequent trial left a lasting impression on everyone involved. It was a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and the search for justice in a quiet coastal town. After the trial, the community of Pacifica tried to return to normal. The events have left a deep scar, but people were determined to move forward. The Tucker family, especially, faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives without Marshall. Lanny Tucker, now serving her life sentence, was transferred to the California Institution for Women. She received psychiatric treatment for her mental health issues. Lanny spent her days writing and attending therapy sessions. She expressed remorse for her actions but knew she would never be able to undo the damage she had caused. Nate Harrison, sentenced to 25 years, was incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. He struggled with guilt and regret, understanding the gravity of his manipulation. Nate's family distanced themselves from him, unable to comprehend his actions. It used his time in prison to reflect on his mistakes, participating in rehabilitation programs and counseling. The community of Pacifica held a memorial for Marshall Tucker every year on the anniversary of his death. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to remember him and celebrate his life. The memorial became a symbol of the town's resilience and unity. Life in Pacifica slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Marshall Tucker and the lessons from his tragic death remained. The community, united by their shared grief, became stronger and more supportive of one another, determined to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. Michael Foster was a 28-year-old man who lived in Huntsville, Alabama. He owned a dog kennel called Happy Paws, where he took care of dogs while their owners were away. Michael loved animals and had a special way of making every dog feel loved and safe. His friends and family often said he had a kind heart and a laid-back personality. Michael lived in a small apartment on Pine Street, a cozy place with pictures of dogs on the walls and dog toys scattered around. After finishing school, he decided to open Happy Paws. His business became well known in Huntsville, with many people trusting him with their pets. Michael had a girlfriend named Darla Green. She was a fitness influencer with tens of thousands of followers on YouTube. Darla often posted videos of her workouts and talked about the importance of women getting strong and muscled. However, their relationship had problems. Darla was known to be very controlling and jealous, which led to many arguments between them. Michael was well-liked by everyone who knew him. He was also an active member of the Huntsville community, volunteering at animal shelters and participating in local events like the Panoply Arts Festival. Michael was known for his friendly nature and his ability to make everyone feel welcome. In the days before his death, Michael was excited about a new project at Happy Paws. He was planning to expand the kennel to accommodate more dogs and offer new services. He talked about his plans with his family and friends, who were all supportive. Michael also loved football and was looking forward to watching the upcoming March Madness games with his friends. Despite these issues, Michael remained focused on his dreams and his love for animals. He was looking forward to the future and all the possibilities it held. Sadly, his life was cut short in a tragic and violent way. On the morning of March 15, 2016, Michael Foster's body was discovered in his apartment. It was around 9:00 a.m. when his neighbor, Alex Leeson, noticed something strange. Alex lived in the apartment next to Michael's on Pine Street. That morning, Alex heard Michael's dog barking nonstop. This was unusual because Michael always made sure his dogs were well behaved. Alex decided to check on Michael. He knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Worried, he used the spare key Michael had given him for emergencies. When Alex opened the door, he immediately knew something was wrong. The apartment was a mess. Furniture was overturned, and there were signs of a struggle everywhere. Alex walked further into the apartment and saw Michael lying on the living room floor. Michael was motionless, and there was a phone charger cord wrapped tightly around his neck. Alex was shocked and terrified. His heart raced as he realized what he was seeing. Trying to stay calm, Alex quickly took out his phone and dialed 911. The 911 operator answered, and Alex, his voice shaking, explained what he had found. He told him about the barking dog, the messy apartment, and finding Michael on the floor. The operator assured Alex that help was on the way and instructed him to stay on the line until the police arrived. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police cars and an ambulance pulled up to the apartment building. They entered the apartment and immediately checked Michael for any signs of life. Sadly, it was clear that Michael was dead. The paramedics arrived and confirmed what the officers already knew. Michael Foster was gone. Officers spoke to Alex, who was still in shock but trying to be helpful. He explained everything he had seen and heard that morning. Police began securing the crime scene, making sure no one else could enter the apartment. News of the discovery spread quickly. Local media, including WAFF 48 News, reported on the tragic event. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief about what had happened to Michael, the kind man who loved dogs and always had a smile for everyone. The discovery of Michael Foster's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would uncover secrets and lead to a shocking conclusion. The police arrived at Michael Foster's apartment quickly after Alex Leeson's 911 call on the morning of March 15, 2016. Detective Sharon Mitchell and her partner, Detective Emerson Carter, were the lead investigators on the case. Detective Mitchell was known for her attention to detail, and Detective Carter was respected for his methodical approach to investigations. When they entered the apartment on Pine Street, they saw a chaotic scene. The living room was in disarray with furniture overturned, and items scattered everywhere. There were clear signs of a struggle. Detective Mitchell immediately noticed the metal phone charger cord wrapped around Michael's neck. It was evident that Michael had been strangled. The detectives began their investigation by carefully examining the crime scene. Detective Mitchell took detailed notes and photographs of everything in the apartment. She pointed out the defensive wounds on Michael's arms, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker. Detective Carter used the fingerprint kit to dust for prints on the furniture and door handles. The crime scene unit arrived with more specialized equipment. They used luminol, a chemical that glows blue when it comes into contact with blood, to look for hidden bloodstains. The living room floor and some pieces of furniture showed traces of blood, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place. Outside, police spoke with neighbors to gather information about any suspicious activity they might have noticed. Several neighbors mentioned hearing loud arguments between Michael and his girlfriend, Darla Green, in the days leading up to his death. This information was noted and would be crucial in the investigation. Back inside the apartment, Detective Carter found a broken picture frame with a photo of Michael and Darla. It was clear that the couple had a tumultuous relationship. The detectives also found Michael's cell phone on the floor. They bagged it as evidence, knowing it could hold important clues. As the investigation continued, Detective Mitchell interviewed Alex Leeson. He described finding Michael's body and the chaos in the apartment. His account matched the evidence the detectives had gathered so far. Alex mentioned that Michael's dog had been barking loudly that morning, which led him to check on his neighbor. The crime scene investigation lasted several hours. By the end of the day, the detectives had gathered a significant amount of evidence. They knew they needed to find out more about Michael's relationships and recent activities to solve the case. The police's thorough and careful work at the crime scene would be the foundation of their investigation into Michael Foster's tragic death. The first suspect in Michael Foster's murder was his girlfriend, Darla Green. Darla was 27 years old and a well-known fitness influencer. She had over 100,000 followers on YouTube, where she posted videos about workouts and healthy living. Darla was muscular and often called herself a muscle girl. She was also rumored to use steroids, which made her personality even more unpredictable. Darla and Michael had been dating for about a year. Their relationship was rocky, with frequent arguments, mostly due to Darla's controlling nature. She was known to be very possessive and jealous, often monitoring Michael's activities and questioning his interactions with others. Friends and neighbors had heard them arguing loudly several times. On March 15, 2016, the police brought Darla in for questioning at the Huntsville Police Department. Detective Sharon Mitchell and Detective Emerson Carter conducted the interview. Darla appeared nervous and defensive from the start. She insisted that she had been at the gym that morning and had no idea what had happened to Michael. The detectives asked Darla about her relationship with Michael. She admitted they had problems but claimed she loved him and would never hurt him. Detective Carter pressed her on the rumors about her using steroids and how it might have affected her behavior. Darla became agitated and denied using any illegal substances, though her aggressive demeanor suggested otherwise. When asked about the night before Michael's death, Darla said they had argued about Michael meeting his ex-girlfriend, Roosevelt Green, who coincidentally was also Darla's mother. She accused Michael of being unfaithful, which he denied. The detectives noted Darla's intense jealousy as a possible motive for the murder. As the interview continued, Darla's story began to show inconsistencies. She couldn't clearly explain her whereabouts during the crucial hours of the morning. Her alibi about being at the gym was shaky, as the gym's security cameras showed no footage of her arriving or leaving. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to confirm Darla's involvement, but her controlling and jealous nature made her a prime suspect. After several hours of questioning, Darla was released, but the detectives kept a close watch on her. They needed to find more evidence to link her to the crime scene. Darla's erratic behavior and the strained relationship with Michael were key points in the ongoing investigation. The second suspect in Michael Foster's murder was his best friend and coworker, Daniel Heiress. Daniel, 30 years old, had been friends with Michael for many years. They worked together at Happy Paws, Michael's dog kennel business. Daniel was known for being loyal and supportive, always there for Michael during tough times. Daniel was brought in for questioning at the Huntsville Police Department on March 16, 2016. Detective Sharon Mitchell and Detective Emerson Carter conducted the interview. Daniel was visibly upset about Michael's death, but he cooperated fully with the police. The detectives began by asking Daniel about his relationship with Michael. Daniel spoke fondly of his friend, describing him as kind and dedicated to his work. He mentioned that they spent a lot of time together, both at work and outside of it. Daniel also admitted that he often tried to mediate the arguments between Michael and Darla Green, Michael's girlfriend. When the detectives asked Daniel if he knew of any reason someone would want to hurt Michael, he hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, Daniel revealed a shocking secret. He and Michael had been involved in a secret sexual relationship. Daniel explained that they had kept it hidden because they feared Darla's reaction. He was worried that Darla might have found out about their relationship and acted violently out of jealousy. Daniel's revelation added a new layer to the investigation. The detectives asked if he thought Darla was capable of harming Michael. Daniel nodded, describing her as controlling and possessive. He mentioned several instances where Darla had shown extreme jealousy, even over small things. The detectives also questioned Daniel about his whereabouts on the morning of March 15. Daniel said he was at home feeling unwell and decided to take the day off from work. He provided the detectives with the names of neighbors who could confirm his story. Detective Mitchell made a note to follow up on Daniel's alibi. Daniel was calm and cooperative throughout the interrogation, but it was clear he was deeply affected by Michael's death. The detectives thanked him for his honesty and assured him they would do everything they could to find the person responsible for Michael's murder. The new information about Michael and Daniel's relationship opened up more questions and potential motives. The detectives knew they needed to dig deeper into the lives of everyone involved to uncover the truth. The third suspect in Michael Foster's murder was Rosa Beth Green, Darla's mother and Michael's ex-girlfriend. Rosa Beth was 56 years old and a high school science teacher. She had remained on friendly terms with Michael even after he started dating her daughter. Rosa Beth was known for being kind and understanding, traits that made her a beloved teacher at Huntsville High School. On March 17, 2016, the police brought Rosa Beth in for questioning. Detectives Sharon Mitchell and Emerson Carter conducted the interview. Rosa Beth appeared calm but worried. She was cooperative and answered all their questions. The detectives began by asking about her relationship with Michael. Rosa Beth explained that she and Michael had dated a few years ago and that she had, quote, the best sex of my life during our time together. She also said they had remained friends after they broke up. She mentioned that they occasionally met for coffee to catch up and talk about life. Rosa Beth admitted that Darla did not like their friendship and often got jealous. When asked about the days leading up to Michael's death, Rosa Beth said she had seen Michael a week before he was killed. They had met at a local Burger King to discuss how Michael could level up his sex life with Darla. Rosa Beth noted that Michael seemed stressed and mentioned problems with Darla, but he didn't go into details. Detective Carter asked Rosa Beth about her whereabouts on the morning of March 15. She stated she was at school, teaching her first period biology class. Several colleagues and students could confirm her presence. The detectives made a note to follow up on her alibi. The conversation then turned to Darla. Rosa Beth expressed concern about her daughter's behavior. She described Darla as controlling and often paranoid about Michael's interactions with other people. Rosa Beth admitted that Darla's jealousy had caused tension between them. She also mentioned her daughter's use of steroids, which seemed to make her more aggressive and unstable. The detectives asked Rosa Beth if she believed Darla was capable of harming Michael. Rosa Beth hesitated but then nodded, saying she feared Darla's jealousy and obsession might have driven her to do something drastic. She shared instances where Darla had acted out in anger, reinforcing the detective's suspicions. Throughout the interview, Rosa Beth remained composed and provided valuable insights into Darla's behavior. The detectives thanked her for her cooperation and assured her they were doing everything they could to find out what happened to Michael. As Rosa Beth left the police station, Detective Mitchell and Detective Carter discussed the new information. Rosa Beth's statements about Darla's jealousy and aggressive behavior added more weight to the growing evidence against Darla. The investigation was moving forward, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. On March 20, 2016, 5 days after Michael Foster's body was found, the police received a significant piece of new evidence. It was a rainy afternoon around 3:00 p.m. when Detective Sharon Mitchell got a call from a resident of Michael's apartment building. A resident said she had found something unusual in the building's trash bin. Detective Mitchell and Detective Emerson Carter arrived at the apartment complex and met with Linda. She handed them a small black diary she had found while taking out her garbage. The diary was in rough shape, but it was clear it had belonged to Darla Green, Michael's girlfriend. The detectives took the diary back to the police station to examine it carefully. As they flipped through the pages, they discovered detailed entries about Darla's relationship with Michael. The entries revealed Darla's growing paranoia and jealousy. She wrote about her suspicions that Michael was cheating on her, not just with his ex-girlfriend Rosabeth Green, but also with a man, which they later confirmed to be Daniel Heiress. One entry from a week before Michael's death stood out. Darla had written about installing hidden cameras in Michael's apartment to monitor his every move. She described how she watched him interact with other people and how it fueled her anger and jealousy. The final entry was chilling. Darla wrote about her plan to confront Michael, expressing fear that he was planning to leave her. The diary provided crucial insight into Darla's state of mind and her obsessive behavior. Detective Carter noted that the entries matched the timeline of events leading up to Michael's murder. The detectives decided to search Darla's apartment for the hidden cameras mentioned in the diary. On March 21, the police obtained a search warrant and went to Darla's apartment. They found several small hidden cameras placed around the living room and bedroom. The cameras were connected to a recording device hidden in a closet. The detectives took the device back to the station for analysis. The recordings from the cameras showed Darla spying on Michael. There were videos of him talking on the phone, meeting with friends, and even interacting with Daniel Heiress. The recordings provided concrete evidence of Darla's invasive and controlling behavior. They also showed her entering and leaving Michael's apartment at odd hours, including the morning of March 15. With this new evidence, the detectives felt they were closer to solving the case. Darla's actions and the contents of the diary painted a clear picture of her mental state and possible motive for murder. The investigation was far from over, but the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. On March 25, 2016, the police finally identified Michael Foster's murderer. Darla Green, Michael's girlfriend, was arrested for his murder. Darla was 27 years old and a fitness influencer with over 100,000 followers on YouTube. Her obsession with controlling Michael and her use of steroids had made her mentally unstable. The detectives pieced together the events leading up to Michael's death from the diary found in Darla's apartment and the hidden camera recordings. The diary detailed Darla's escalating paranoia and jealousy. She suspected Michael of cheating on her with both his ex-girlfriend Rosabeth Green, who was also Darla's mother, and his best friend Daniel Heiress. On the night of March 14, Darla confronted Michael in his apartment. Her anger and jealousy led to a heated argument. The hidden cameras recorded parts of this confrontation. In a fit of rage, Darla grabbed the phone charger cord and strangled Michael. The struggle left the apartment in disarray, and Michael tried to fight back but was overpowered. On the morning of March 15, Darla left the apartment, hoping to make it look like Michael had been attacked by someone else. She went to the gym to establish an alibi, but the gym's security cameras did not capture her presence, weakening her defense. Detectives Sharon Mitchell and Emerson Carter gathered all the evidence and presented it to the district attorney. With the diary, the recordings, and Darla's inconsistent alibi, they had a strong case against her. The police decided to arrest Darla at her apartment. On the afternoon of March 25, the police arrived at Darla's apartment. Detective Mitchell knocked on the door, and Darla answered, looking surprised and nervous. Detective Carter informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Michael Foster. Darla's face turned pale, and she began to cry, but she did not resist arrest. As Darla was taken away in handcuffs, the news quickly spread. Michael's family was relieved that the murderer had been caught, but devastated by the betrayal from someone they had trusted. They expressed their gratitude to the police for their hard work in solving the case. Neighbors and local media, including Delive AFF 48 News, reported on the arrest, highlighting the tragic end of a troubled relationship. The community was shocked that someone as well-known as Darla could commit such a crime. The arrest of Darla Green marked a significant breakthrough in the investigation. The detectives felt a sense of closure, knowing they had brought Michael's killer to justice. However, the pain of his loss remained for his family and friends, who had to come to terms with the tragic events. The trial of Darla Green began on June 12, 2016, at the Madison County Courthouse. The case had garnered significant media attention, with local news outlets covering every development. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Oliver Leeson, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and thorough. In his opening statement, Leeson laid out the evidence against Darla. He highlighted the diary entries that detailed her escalating paranoia, the hidden camera recordings that captured her confrontations with Michael, and the physical evidence from the crime scene. Leeson argued that Darla's jealousy and obsession drove her to murder Michael in a fit of rage. The defense attorney, Lisa Roberts, was a 38-year-old known for her calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. She argued that Darla was not in her right mind at the time of the murder due to the effects of steroids and emotional stress. Roberts claimed that Darla's actions were not premeditated but the result of a temporary lapse in judgment caused by her mental state. Throughout the trial, Michael's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of sorrow and anger. They listened intently as witnesses, including neighbors and Michael's friends, testified about the turbulent relationship between Michael and Darla. Daniel Heiress's testimony about his secret relationship with Michael added a layer of complexity to the case, revealing the depth of Darla's jealousy. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On June 28, 2016, the foreman announced that Darla Green was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Michael's family hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. They felt a sense of justice but were still grieving their loss. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution argued for a severe punishment, emphasizing the brutality of the crime and the impact on Michael's loved ones. The defense pleaded for leniency, citing Darla's mental health issues and lack of prior criminal history. In the end, the judge sentenced Darla to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Michael's family felt it was a fair punishment, while some of Darla's supporters believed it was too harsh, considering her mental state. The community was divided, with debates about the influence of steroids on behavior and the responsibilities of those who used them. The trial's conclusion brought some closure to Michael's family, but the emotional scars remained. They had to learn to live without him, holding on to the memories of the kind and gentle man they had lost. After the trial, life slowly began to move on for everyone involved. Michael Foster's family struggled with their loss, but they found solace in their memories of him. His parents, David and Linda Foster, started a charity in Michael's name, the Foster Animal Foundation, to support animal shelters in Huntsville. This helped them feel connected to Michael's passion for animals and gave them a sense of purpose. Daniel Heiress, Michael's best friend and coworker, faced a difficult time. The revelation of his secret relationship with Michael had shocked many, but he received support from friends and colleagues. Daniel continued working at Happy Paws, the dog kennel Michael had started, determined to keep Michael's dream alive. He also sought therapy to help him cope with the trauma and grief. Rosa Beth Green, Darla's mother and Michael's ex-girlfriend, also found the aftermath challenging. As a high school science teacher, she focused on her students, finding some distraction in her work. She remained in touch with Michael's family, sharing their sorrow and supporting their charity efforts. The ordeal brought her closer to them, creating a bond of shared grief. Darla Green's YouTube channel, once filled with workout videos and health tips, was abandoned. Her followers were shocked by the news of her crime. In prison, Darla participated in mental health programs and anger management classes. She spent her time reflecting on Michael's friends and family held an annual memorial at Happy Paws on his birthday, celebrating his life and love for animals. This gathering became a tradition, a way for everyone to remember Michael and find comfort in each other's company. The trial and its aftermath had left a mark on everyone involved. They had all been touched by Michael's kindness and the tragedy of his untimely death. Through their efforts to honor his memory and support each other, they found a way to heal and move forward. Johnny Ray Baxter was a 45-year-old man living in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He was a well-known real estate agent who worked for a local company called Ozark Realty. Johnny Ray had a big smile and a friendly personality, which made him popular with his clients and colleagues. He had a degree in business administration from the University of Arkansas and had been working in real estate for over 20 years. Johnny Ray was married to Darlene Baxter. Johnny Ray and Darlene seemed like a happy couple. Johnny Ray was Darlene's second husband. He had a stepdaughter named Lily Adams, who was 18 and in her first year at the University of Arkansas studying psychology. Johnny Ray got along well with Lily, or so it seemed to the outside world. Outside of work, Johnny Ray loved sailing. He owned a small sailboat named Dreamcatcher, which he often took out on Beaver Lake. He enjoyed spending weekends on the water, feeling the wind and the waves. His friends at the local marina remembered him as someone who was always willing to lend a hand and share a laugh. In the days before his death, Johnny Ray was busy with a big property deal. He was working hard to close a sale on a large commercial property in downtown Fayetteville. This deal was very important to him in his career. He was also planning a surprise anniversary trip for Darling. He had booked a cabin in the Ozark Mountains and bought tickets to see a concert in Little Rock. He even picked out a special necklace from a local jewelry store, Sissy's Log Cabin, as a gift for Darling. Despite his busy schedule, Johnny Ray made time to visit the local coffee shop, Arsaga's, every morning. He enjoyed reading the newspaper and chatting with the baristas. His favorite drink was a caramel latte. On April 10, 2015, 2 days before his death, Johnny Ray was seen at Arsaga's smiling and talking about his plans for the weekend. He seemed happy and excited about the future. Johnny Ray's life seemed perfect on the outside, but there were hidden troubles. His wife, Darling, had been acting stressed and worried lately. She had noticed changes in their daughter, Lily, and was suspicious of Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors had started to notice the tension in the Baxter household. On April 12, 2015, at about 7:30 a.m., Johnny Ray Baxter's body was discovered. The person who found him was his neighbor, Michael Everly. Michael was a 52-year-old retired school teacher who lived next door to the Baxters. Darling had called Michael, worried because she hadn't heard from Johnny Ray since the previous night. She was out of town visiting her sister and asked Michael to check on her husband. Michael knocked on the door of the Baxter house but got no answer. He noticed that Johnny Ray's car was in the driveway, so he decided to try the door. To his surprise, it was unlocked. As he stepped inside, he immediately felt something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Michael called out for Johnny Ray but got no response. He walked through the living room and into the kitchen, where he saw signs of a struggle, chairs overturned and broken glass on the floor. He followed the trail of chaos to the master bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a gruesome sight. Johnny Ray was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The room was a mess, with blood splattered on the walls and furniture. It was clear that Johnny Ray had fought for his life. Michael was horrified and immediately backed out of the room, his hands shaking. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he described what he had found. The 911 operator tried to keep him calm, asking him to stay on the line until the police arrived. The news of Johnny Ray's death quickly spread through the neighborhood. Maple Street was soon filled with police cars, and curious neighbors stood outside, whispering to each other about the shocking event. Local news stations like Heiress and KN2A sent reporters to cover the story, and by noon, it was the top news in Fayetteville. Michael, who had been friends with Johnny Ray for years, was in a state of shock. He had never expected to find his neighbor and friend dead in such a brutal manner. He later told reporters that Johnny Ray was a good man who didn't deserve such a terrible fate. The discovery of Johnny Ray Baxter's body marked the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation, one that would uncover hidden secrets and lead to shocking revelations about those closest to him. The police arrived at the Baxter home quickly after Michael Everly's 911 call on April 12, 2015. The first officers on the scene immediately secured the area, making sure no one entered or left the house. Soon after, Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter arrived to lead the investigation. Detective Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey was known for her sharp mind and attention to detail. At 38 years old, she had solved many difficult cases. Her partner, Detective James Carter, was 42 and had a reputation for his methodical approach. Together, they made a strong team. As the detectives walked through the house, they saw signs of a struggle. The living room had overturned chairs and broken glass. The kitchen had more chaos, with dishes scattered on the floor. When they reached the master bedroom, they were met with a grisly scene. Johnny Ray Baxter lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The walls and furniture were splattered with blood, showing the violence of the attack. Detective Mitchell-Kinsey noted the hammer as the murder weapon and ordered it to be bagged as evidence. The crime scene was chaotic and disturbing. The detectives and forensic team took many photos and collected samples. They used gloves to carefully pick up items, making sure not to contaminate any evidence. Blood samples, fingerprints, and the hammer were all collected and sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, neighbors watched as the police worked. The local news stations, KFSM and KNUA, were there too, reporting on the shocking murder. Reporters spoke to neighbors who described Johnny Ray as a friendly and well-liked man. The media coverage added pressure to solve the case quickly. Detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter interviewed Michael Everly, who was still shaken from discovering the body. He described finding the door unlocked and seeing the mess inside the house. His detailed account helped the detectives piece together the events leading up to the murder. By the end of the day, the police had gathered a lot of evidence but still had many questions. Who could have committed such a brutal act? Why would someone want to kill Johnny Ray? The detectives knew they had a difficult case ahead of them, but they were determined to find the answers. The first suspect in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder was his wife, Darlene Baxter. Darlene was 34 years old and worked as an accountant for a local firm called Razorback Accounting. She was intelligent, meticulous, and hardworking. Darlene had a tough past. She became a mother at 16 and worked as a stripper to support herself and her daughter, Lily. Despite these challenges, she built a successful career and was known for her strong-willed nature. Darlene had recently noticed changes in her daughter Lily's behavior and grew suspicious of Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors described Darlene as increasingly stressed and on edge in the weeks before the murder. Some said they heard arguments between her and Johnny Ray. Detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter brought Darlene in for questioning on April 13, 2015. Darlene appeared calm but was clearly distressed. She maintained that she had been out of town visiting her sister Nancy in Little Rock. She provided photos and text messages to support her alibi, but the detectives still had doubts. During the interrogation, Darlene spoke about her relationship with Johnny Ray. She admitted they had been arguing more lately, mainly about his work and the amount of time he spent away from home. She denied any involvement in his death, insisting she loved her husband despite their problems. The detectives asked Darlene about the night of the murder. She explained that she had left for Little Rock on the afternoon of April 11 and stayed with Nancy until the morning of April 12. Nancy confirmed this story when the detectives called her. However, it couldn't ignore the tension in Darlene's voice when she spoke about Johnny Ray and the changes she noticed in Lily. The police also searched Darlene's car and belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but they did find a diary in which Darlene had written about her frustrations and suspicions. These entries painted a picture of a woman under immense stress and emotional turmoil. Despite her alibi, Darlene remained a prime suspect. The detectives continued to look into her past, interviewing friends, family, and coworkers. They hoped to find a motive or any clue that could tie her to the crime. The pressure on Darlene grew as the investigation progressed, but she remained steadfast in her innocence. The investigation into Darlene Baxter was thorough, yet many questions remained unanswered. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the truth behind Johnny Ray's brutal murder. The second suspect in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder was his stepdaughter, Lily Adams. Lily was 18 years old and a freshman at the University of Arkansas, where she was studying psychology. She was known for her outgoing and sociable personality. Her friends described her as bright and ambitious, always eager to learn new things. Lily had a complicated relationship with her stepfather, Johnny Ray. It was revealed during the investigation that their relationship had evolved into a secret affair. This affair made Lily feel guilty and conflicted, especially as she saw the strain it put on her mother, Darlene. Detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter brought Lily in for questioning on April 14, 2015. Lily appeared nervous but cooperative. She admitted to the affair with Johnny Ray, explaining that it had started about 6 months earlier. She said she had been feeling lonely and confused, and Johnny Ray had been there for her. She insisted she never wanted to hurt anyone. During the interrogation, Lily explained how she had confided in a close friend about the affair and her feelings of guilt. This friend, whose name was not disclosed, confirmed Lily's story to the detectives. Lily described the last time she saw Johnny Ray, which was the night before his death. She said they had argued about the affair and the impact it was having on their family. The detectives asked Lily about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Lily said she had been in a friend's house, studying for a midterm exam. Her friend confirmed this alibi, saying that Lily had stayed there until the early morning hours of April 12th. Despite the alibi, the detectives were suspicious of the emotional turmoil that Lily was going through. The police also searched Lily's dorm room and her belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but did find several letters and notes between her and Johnny Ray. These notes showed the depth of their relationship and the emotional struggles they both faced. Despite her alibi and the lack of direct evidence, Lily remained a prime suspect due to the affair and the emotional tension it created. The detectives continued to interview her friends and classmates, hoping to find any inconsistencies or new leads. The pressure on Lily grew as the investigation continued, but she maintained her innocence and expressed deep regret for the affair. The investigation into Lily Adams was thorough, but the detectives still had many questions. They knew they had to keep digging to find the truth behind Johnny Ray Baxter's brutal murder. On April 17, 2015, 5 days after Johnny Ray Baxter's murder, the police received a significant break in the case. It was a cool, cloudy morning when a jogger discovered a suspicious item in the park near Beaver Lake. He noticed a plastic bag partially buried under some leaves near a bench. Curious, he opened it and found a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. He immediately called the police, and within minutes, patrol officers Karen Lewis and Tom Martinez arrived at the scene. They secured the area and called in detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter. The detectives quickly assessed the situation and bagged the items for forensic analysis. The detectives were cautious but hopeful that this new evidence would provide a breakthrough in the case. They brought the items back to the Fayetteville Police Department's forensic lab. Forensic analysts found that the blood on the shirt matched Johnny Ray's DNA. Additionally, the gloves had fingerprints that were not Johnny Ray's. This new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation. The detectives revisited their list of suspects and re-examined their alibis. They also reviewed the surveillance footage from the park and nearby areas. This extensive review led them to a surprising discovery. A figure matching Lily Adams' description was seen entering the park late on the night of the murder. Detectives Mitchell-Kinsey and Carter brought Lily in for a second round of questioning. This time, Lily was visibly more nervous. She claimed she had gone to the park to clear her head and had no idea about the bloody items. The detectives pressed her for more details, but Lily stuck to her story, albeit shakily. The forensic team continued their analysis and found another critical piece of evidence: hair fibers on the gloves that matched Darlene Baxter's DNA. This discovery complicated the case further and indicated the possible involvement of both mother and daughter. On April 18, 2015, the detectives called Darlene back for questioning. She seemed calm but concerned when presented with the new evidence. Darlene admitted to knowing about the gloves but insisted she had nothing to do with the murder. She said she had worn the gloves while gardening and couldn't explain how they ended up near Beaver Lake. The police were now more determined than ever to solve the case. They knew they were close to uncovering the truth but needed to carefully piece together the final puzzle. The discovery of the new evidence was a pivotal moment in the investigation, providing crucial leads and intensifying the search for Johnny Ray Baxter's murderer. The third suspect in the murder of Johnny Ray Baxter was his ex-wife, Diddy Baxter. Diddy, aged 46, was known for her hot-tempered and aggressive nature. She had a contentious relationship with Johnny Ray and had never approved of his marriage to Darlene. Diddy lived in Fayetteville and worked as a manager at a local grocery store, Harp's Food Stores. Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter decided to bring Diddy in for questioning on April 19, 2015. Diddy arrived at the police station appearing defiant and uncooperative. She had a reputation for speaking her mind and not holding back her opinions. During the interrogation, Diddy admitted that she and Johnny Ray had a rocky relationship. She described their marriage as tumultuous and full of arguments. Diddy expressed her disdain for Darlene, calling her a homewrecker and blaming her for the end of her marriage. However, Diddy vehemently denied any involvement in Johnny Ray's murder. The detectives pressed Diddy about her whereabouts on the night of April 11, 2015. Diddy claimed she was at home, watching TV and drinking wine. She mentioned watching an episode of Dancing with the Stars and going to bed early. There were no witnesses to confirm her alibi, which made the detectives suspicious. The police searched Diddy's home for any evidence that could link her to the crime. They found a few items of interest, including a set of gardening gloves similar to the ones found at the park. However, forensic analysis showed no blood or DNA on these gloves. Despite her alibi and the lack of direct evidence, the detectives continued to probe Diddy's potential motive. They discovered that Diddy had recently learned about Johnny Ray's affair with Lily, which added another layer of tension and potential anger. Friends and coworkers told the detectives that Diddy had been particularly upset and vocal about the affair, calling Johnny Ray a disgrace and expressing her anger to anyone who would listen. The detectives also interviewed Diddy's neighbors, who reported hearing loud arguments coming from her house in the days leading up to the murder. One neighbor, Mrs. Everly, said she heard Diddy yelling about betrayal and lies. Although Diddy remained the suspect, the detectives found it challenging to gather enough evidence to charge her. She was aggressive during the interrogation, but maintained her innocence. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to link her to the crime. The investigation into Diddy Baxter added another layer of complexity to the case, as the detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading to Johnny Ray's murder. On April 21, 2015, the breakthrough in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder case finally came. After days of investigating, Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter found a crucial piece of evidence. A surveillance camera from a nearby gas station had captured footage of Darlene Baxter driving toward Beaver Lake late on the night of the murder. This was a significant lead that contradicted Darlene's alibi. Detectives Mitchell-Kinsey and Carter reviewed the footage carefully. It showed Darlene's car, a blue Honda Civic, passing the gas station at around 11:30 p.m. on April 11. This placed her near the crime scene at the crucial time. With this new evidence, the detectives were confident they had found Johnny Ray's killer. On the morning of April 22, 2015, the police arrived at Darlene Baxter's workplace, Razorback Accounting. It was a sunny day, and the local news stations, including KFSM and KNWA, were already covering the latest developments in the case. Darlene was in her office when the police entered. She looked surprised but remained composed as they informed her of her arrest for the murder of her husband. As Darlene was led out in handcuffs, she maintained her innocence, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The affair between Johnny Ray and Lily had driven Darlene into a fit of rage. She felt deeply betrayed by both her husband and her daughter. The detectives believed that on the night of the murder, Darlene confronted Johnny Ray. The confrontation escalated into violence, and Darlene grabbed the hammer, fatally striking him multiple times. Darlene's arrest shocked the community. Neighbors and friends couldn't believe that the hardworking, intelligent woman they knew was capable of such a violent act. The news spread quickly, with headlines in the Fayetteville Observer and segments on local news stations detailing the arrest. Johnny Ray's family had mixed reactions. Some were relieved that the murderer had been caught, while others were devastated by the betrayal. Lily was particularly heartbroken. She had lost both her stepfather and her mother in a matter of days. The emotional toll on the family was immense. As Darlene was taken to the police station, she continued to deny her involvement. However, the detectives were confident in their findings. The surveillance footage, combined with the forensic evidence and Darlene's conflicting statements, painted a clear picture of her guilt. The community of Fayetteville was left to grapple with the tragic events. Johnny Ray Baxter's murder had uncovered deep family secrets and left a lasting impact on those who knew him. The police had solved the case, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. The trial of Darlene Baxter for the murder of her husband, Johnny Ray Baxter, began on July 15, 2015, at the Washington County Courthouse in Fayetteville. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KSSM and KNWA, as well as concerned members of the community. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Robert Stevens, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and relentless in the courtroom. He argued that Darlene's motive for the murder was her discovery of the affair between Johnny Ray and Lily. Stevens painted a picture of a woman pushed to her breaking point by betrayal and emotional turmoil. He presented the surveillance footage of Darlene's car near Beaver Lake, the forensic evidence from the crime scene, and the conflicting statements she had given to the police. On the other side, the defense was led by attorney Michelle Williams, a 39-year-old known for her calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. She argued that Darlene was innocent and that the evidence was circumstantial. Williams suggested that someone else could have committed the murder, perhaps out of jealousy or anger. He questioned the reliability of the surveillance footage and pointed out that no witnesses had seen Darlene commit the crime. Throughout the trial, Johnny Ray's family sat in the front row, watching the proceedings with a mixture of anger and sadness. Lily, in particular, struggled with the emotional weight of the trial. She had lost her stepfather and now faced the possibility of losing her mother to a long prison sentence. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On August 3, 2015, the jury found Darlene Baxter guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. Darlene showed little emotion, while Johnny Ray's family wept and hugged each other. The local news immediately reported the verdict, and the story was covered extensively in the Fayetteville Observer. Judge Lisa Everly sentenced Darlene to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She stated that the evidence clearly showed Darlene's guilt and that the crime was a result of intense personal betrayal and anger. The judge expressed sympathy for Johnny Ray's family and hoped the sentence would bring them some measure of closure. The reaction to the verdict was mixed. Some in the community felt justice had been served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh, considering Darlene's difficult past and the emotional stress she was under. Johnny Ray's family, however, felt a sense of relief that the ordeal was over and that the person responsible for his death was held accountable. The trial and sentencing marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Baxter family and the community of Fayetteville. The murder and its aftermath had left deep emotional scars, but the verdict provided a sense of justice and a step toward healing. After Darlene Baxter's trial and sentencing, life slowly began to return to normal for those involved in Johnny Ray Baxter's tragic murder case. For Darlene, now serving her sentence at the Arkansas Department of Correction, life took on a stark routine. She was allowed limited visits from family and friends, with strict rules governing her daily activities. The media coverage surrounding the trial gradually faded, replaced by new stories and events in Fayetteville like the annual Bikes, Blues, and BDQ motorcycle rally. Lily Adams, now 19, returned to the University of Arkansas to continue her studies in psychology. She struggled with guilt and grief over her role in the affair that ultimately led to her stepfather's death. Lily sought counseling to help her cope with the emotional aftermath and worked hard to rebuild relationships with her family. She distanced herself from media attention, focusing on her studies and volunteer work at local animal shelters. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Mitchell Kinsey received recognition for her role in solving the high-profile case. She continued her work at the Fayetteville Police Department, investigating other crimes and mentoring younger detectives. Detective James Carter transferred to the Northwest Arkansas Drug Task Force, where he applied his investigative skills to combating drug-related crimes in the region. In the community of Fayetteville, the impact of Johnny Ray's murder lingered. Neighbors and friends remembered him as a friendly and successful real estate agent who loved sailing on Beaver Lake. The local Rotary Club held a memorial service in his honor, and a plaque was installed at the Fayetteville Town Center to commemorate his life and contributions to the community. Johnny Ray's family, especially his first wife, Diddy, found solace in each other's company and support. Diddy focused on her career at Hart's Food Stores and became involved in local charity events, like the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure in Bentonville. She remained vigilant about keeping her family close and supporting her grandchildren, who missed their stepfather dearly. As time passed, the scars left by Johnny Ray's murder began to heal, though the memory of the tragic events of April 2015 remained a part of Fayetteville's history. The community rallied around the Baxter family, offering support and understanding as they moved forward from the ordeal. This tragic case of love, betrayal, and murder serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. In today's episode, we take you to a seemingly perfect marriage that was shattered by betrayal, secrets, and a brutal murder. This is the story of Colette Jackson, a loving wife, and the devastating consequences of uncovering a secret that would destroy everything. Colette Jackson was a 36-year-old woman who lived in Lodi, New Jersey. She was known in her community as a kind-hearted and creative person who loved helping others, especially children. Colette worked as an art teacher in a local school where she taught disadvantaged kids. She believed that art could make a difference in the lives of children who didn't have much else to turn to. Colette's classroom was always full of bright colors, paintings, and drawings. She was the type of teacher who stayed late after school to help her students finish projects or just to talk if they needed someone to listen. Her passion for art wasn't just limited to the classroom. Colette lived in a modest but cozy home with her husband, Steven Jackson. The couple had been married for nearly 10 years and appeared to have a strong and happy marriage. They often attended community events together, such as the Lodi Street Fair and the annual town Christmas parade. Colette and Stephen were well-liked by their neighbors, who often described them as a perfect couple. However, beneath the surface, Colette was dealing with more than anyone knew. In the weeks leading up to her death, Colette had been feeling increasingly stressed and anxious. She had mentioned to a close friend that she felt something was off in her marriage, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Despite her worries, Colette continued to pour herself into her work. She had recently started planning a new art program for her students, which she hoped would be ready by the fall. Colette was excited about the future and had big plans for both her career and her personal life. She had even started talking about the possibility of having children, something she and Stephen had been considering for a while. But Colette's dreams and plans would never come to fruition. She was unaware that her life was about to be tragically cut short, and the secrets that had been hidden for so long would soon come to light, changing everything. On the morning of August 14, 2013, the peaceful suburb of Lodi, New Jersey, was shaken by a horrifying discovery. At around 9:30 a.m., Angela Lagrima, a close friend of Colette Jackson, arrived at the Jackson home for their regular coffee date. Angela and Colette had been friends for years, often spending time together chatting about life, work, and their mutual love for art. That morning, Angela expected nothing more than a relaxing visit with her friend. But as she approached the house, she noticed that something seemed off. The curtains were drawn, and the front door, usually open to let in the morning light, was tightly shut. When Angela entered the living room, she was met with a scene that would haunt her forever. Colette was lying on the floor, her throat slit so deeply that her neck was nearly severed. Blood had cooled around her, staining the carpet a dark red. The sight was so shocking that Angela froze, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. After a few moments, she snapped out of her shock and frantically dialed 911, her hands shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the phone. Angela's voice was barely steady as she spoke to the emergency operator, describing what she had found. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what had happened. She couldn't believe that her friend, the kind and gentle Colette, had met such a violent end. The operator instructed Angela to wait outside until the police arrived, which she did, standing on the front lawn, numb and in disbelief. As she waited, Angela couldn't help but think about the last time she had seen Colette, just a few days earlier. They had met up for lunch at a local diner, talking and laughing as they always did. Colette had seemed a bit tired, but otherwise fine. Now, just days later, she was gone, and the life she had been so passionate about had been brutally taken from her. The Lodi Police Department received the 911 call at 9:45 a.m. on August 14, 2013. Within minutes, officers arrived at the Jackson home, quickly securing the area. Detective Frank Marino, a 20-year veteran of the force known for his calm demeanor and meticulous attention to detail, led the investigation. Marino had seen his share of crime scenes, but the brutality of this one struck him immediately. As the police entered the house, they were met with the stark contrast between the cozy, lived-in space and the gruesome scene in the living room. Colette Jackson's lifeless body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood that had soaked into the carpet. Her throat had been slit with such force that it nearly severed her neck. The blood spatter on the walls and nearby furniture indicated a violent struggle. Marino took a moment to absorb the scene before instructing his team to begin the investigation. The crime scene was treated with the utmost care. The detectives worked methodically, photographing every angle of the room and collecting evidence. They noticed that nothing appeared to be out of place, no signs of forced entry or theft. Colette's purse was still on the kitchen counter, her keys next to it. Her phone was on the coffee table, untouched. This led Marino to believe that Colette had known her attacker and had not expected any danger. The murder weapon, a large kitchen knife, was found near Colette's body, covered in blood. Marino instructed the forensic team to bag the knife for further analysis. He also requested that they test the blood for fingerprints, hoping that the killer might have left a trace. The team dusted for prints on every surface, carefully lifting samples to be sent to the lab. As they continued their search, Marino noticed a small, partially open box in the corner of the room. Inside were prescription pill bottles, one of which was empty. Marino found this odd, given that Colette was not known to be on any heavy medication. He made a note to follow up on the pills, suspecting they could be a clue to the killer's identity. The medical examiner, Dr. Agnes Jiang, arrived shortly after and began her examination of Colette's body. Jiang, who had worked closely with Marino on previous cases, shared his preliminary findings. The deep, clean cut to the throat suggested a sharp, heavy blade and a strong hand. Jiang estimated that Colette had been dead for several hours, likely since the early hours of the morning. By the time the sun began to set, the police had gathered all the evidence they could find. The once warm and inviting home now felt cold and empty, marked by the traces of a life abruptly ended. Marino knew this was just the beginning. The next step was to unravel the mystery of who could have committed such a heinous act and why. Stephen Jackson, Colette's husband, was the first person the police investigated. At 40 years old, Stephen was a well-known accountant in Lodi. He was respected for his precision with numbers and was described by colleagues as dependable but quiet. Stephen had a routine life, early mornings, long hours at the office, and weekend golf outings with his best friend, Ernie Lagrima. On the surface, he seemed like a devoted husband, but Detective Frank Marino sensed that there was more to his story. When police first questioned Stephen, he appeared distraught, claiming to be devastated by his wife's death. He told officers that he had been out of the house the previous night, visiting his elderly mother in a nearby town. His alibi seemed solid at first, as his mother and a neighbor both confirmed that Stephen had been there until late in the evening. However, Marino wasn't entirely convinced. There was something off about Stephen's behavior. He wasn't just grieving. He seemed nervous, almost as if he were hiding something. As the interview continued, Stephen's demeanor shifted. When Marino began asking about his relationship with Colette, Stephen grew defensive. He insisted that their marriage was strong, despite the usual ups and downs. But when pressed about his whereabouts during the early morning hours of August 14, Stephen hesitated. He stammered slightly before repeating that he had been at his mother's house. Marino noted this hesitation, suspecting that Stephen wasn't telling the whole truth. The investigation took a turn when the police discovered Stephen's addiction to opiates. A search of the Jackson home uncovered several empty pill bottles hidden in Stephen's closet. The pills were prescribed to different names, raising suspicion that Stephen had been illegally obtaining them. When confronted with this evidence, Stephen initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually he broke down and admitted to the addiction. He claimed that he had been struggling for years and that Colette didn't know about it. Stephen's addiction raised red flags for the investigators. They began to wonder if it was connected to Colette's murder. Could Stephen's drug habit have driven him to kill his wife, either in a moment of rage or to cover up his secret? Marino asked Stephen if he had ever gotten violent with Colette, but Stephen vehemently denied it, insisting that he loved her and would never hurt her. Despite Stephen's denials, Marino remained suspicious. The discovery of the opiates, combined with Stephen's inconsistent answers, suggested that there was more to his story. The police decided to keep a close eye on Stephen as they continued to piece together the events leading up to Colette's death. They needed more evidence before they could make an arrest, but Stephen was now firmly in their sights. Ernie Lagrima, Stephen's best friend, and a well-known lawyer in Lodi, was the second person the police focused on. Ernie, 52, had a reputation for being charismatic and outgoing, often the life of the party at local gatherings. He and Stephen had been friends since college, and their bond seemed unbreakable. They were known for their regular weekend golf outings, which they often talked about at the local diner, Jerry's Place, where they were regulars. But as Detective Frank Marino dug deeper into Ernie's life, he uncovered a shocking secret. The police brought Ernie in for questioning at the station. He appeared calm and cooperative, even joking with the officers as they began the interview. Ernie expressed disbelief at Colette's murder, claiming he couldn't imagine why anyone would want to harm her. He described her as a sweet, kind woman who was always supportive of Stephen. But as the questioning continued, Marino noticed a shift in Ernie's demeanor. When asked about his relationship with Stephen, Ernie became more guarded, carefully choosing his words. Marino pressed Ernie about the golf outings he and Stephen frequently took. Ernie insisted that they were just regular trips, nothing more than a chance to relax and unwind. But when Marino mentioned the possibility of something more going on during these trips, Ernie's composure faltered. He hesitated before admitting that he and Stephen had been involved in a sexual relationship for several years. They had kept it hidden from everyone, including their wives, fearing the consequences if it ever came to light. Ernie's confession was a bombshell for the investigators. It provided a possible motive for Colette's murder, had she discovered the affair and threatened to expose them. Ernie insisted that Colette had no idea about the relationship and that Stephen would never have harmed her. He claimed that their relationship was based on love and that Stephen was deeply troubled by the murder. Despite Ernie's calm demeanor, Marino wasn't convinced. The affair added a new layer of complexity to the case, and Marino suspected that Ernie might be hiding more. The police decided to dig deeper into Ernie's background, checking his alibi for the night of the murder and looking into his phone records to see if there were any suspicious communications between him and Stephen. Ernie's charm and confidence couldn't erase the fact that he was now a key suspect in Colette's murder, and Marino knew they needed to keep a close watch on him. The third person under scrutiny was Angela Lygram, Ernie's wife and a close friend of Colette. At 46, Angela was a dedicated teacher at a school for economically disadvantaged children, known for her kind heart and tireless efforts to support her students. She and Colette had shared many conversations about their work and their lives, often meeting for coffee at the local Starbucks. Angela was devastated by Colette's death, and at first glance, she seemed an unlikely suspect. However, as the investigation continued, the police uncovered information that made them reconsider. Angela was brought in for questioning the day after Ernie's confession. She appeared composed but visibly saddened, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke about Colette. Angela described Colette as a dear friend, someone she could always rely on. She insisted that she had no idea who would want to harm her. But when Detective Frank Marino began asking about her marriage, Angela's demeanor changed. She became more guarded, her answers shorter and less forthcoming. Marino pressed Angela about her knowledge of Ernie and Stephen's sexual relationship. To the surprise of the investigators, Angela admitted that she had known about the affair for some time. She explained that she had discovered them together about a year earlier, coming home early from a friend's wedding to find them curled up together in her bed. Angela said she was shocked at first, but decided against confronting Ernie. She said decided to accept it. She told the detectives that she believed in the saying different strokes for different folks, and had chosen not to interfere. This revelation cast Angela in a new light. If she had known about the affair, could she have been motivated by jealousy or anger? Marino asked if she had ever discussed the relationship with Colette, but Angela insisted that she had kept it to herself, not wanting to hurt her friend. She claimed that she had made peace with the situation and had no reason to harm Colette. Despite Angela's calm explanation, the police couldn't ignore the possibility that her knowledge of the affair might have led to resentment. They decided to look deeper into her actions leading up to the murder. Angela's phone records and her whereabouts on the night of August 13 were closely examined. Although Angela maintained her innocence, the investigators couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story. As the pieces of the puzzle slowly came together, Angela remained a person of interest. Her connection to both Colette and the affair made her involvement in the case impossible to ignore. The police knew that they needed to keep pressing, hoping to uncover the truth about what really happened that night. On the morning of August 18, 2013, the investigation took a critical turn. It was a warm summer day in Lodi, with the temperature already climbing into the 80s by mid-morning. Detective Frank Marino and his team were continuing their work at the Jackson home, determined to find any overlooked clues. As the sun beat down on the quiet suburban neighborhood, Marino received a call from the forensic lab that would shift the direction of the case. The lab had completed an in-depth analysis of the blood found on the kitchen knife at the crime scene. Initially, the blood was assumed to belong solely to Colette, but the lab had discovered something unexpected, a small but distinct trace of another person's DNA mixed with the blood. Marino's heart raced as he listened to the results. The DNA belonged to Stephen Jackson. This finding was significant. It suggested that Stephen had been much closer to the crime than he had initially claimed. The presence of his DNA on the murder weapon raised serious questions about his involvement. Marino immediately contacted Stephen's lawyer to arrange a follow-up interview, but Stephen had gone into hiding, fueling the police's suspicions even further. Later that day, the police received another crucial piece of evidence. A neighbor who had been out of town during the initial investigation came forward with new information. The neighbor recalled seeing Stephen's car parked outside the Jackson home at around 2:00 a.m. on the night of the murder. This directly contradicted Stephen's earlier alibi that he had spent the night at his mother's house. With this new timeline in mind, Marino revisited the security footage from nearby homes. After hours of reviewing tapes, the team finally caught a glimpse of Stephen's car driving down the street at 1:45 a.m., just minutes before the neighbor spotted it parked at the house. This new evidence placed Stephen at the scene of the crime during the critical hours when Colette was murdered. Marino and his team felt a growing sense of urgency. The evidence was mounting against Stephen, but they knew they needed more to secure an arrest. They focused on tracking Stephen's movements after the crime, using his cell phone records to trace his location. The data showed that he had driven to a remote area outside of Lodi, where he stayed for several hours before returning home later that morning. This new evidence gave the police a much clearer picture of what had happened that night. Stephen's DNA on the knife, the neighbor's testimony, and the security footage all pointed to him being involved in Colette's death. The investigation was now centered on finding Stephen and bringing him in for questioning. On the evening of August 20, 2013, the Lodi police were closing in on their prime suspect, Stephen Jackson. The mounting evidence, including his DNA on the murder weapon, and the neighbor's testimony placing him at the scene, had made it clear that Stephen was involved in his wife Colette's brutal murder. As the sun began to set, Detective Frank Marino and his team prepared for the next step, Stephen's arrest. Stephen, a 40-year-old accountant, had always been seen as a quiet and dependable man. But behind his reserved exterior, he harbored dark secrets that would soon unravel. Stephen had been having a secret love affair with his best friend, Ernie Lagrima, for years. When Colette accidentally discovered the affair, she threatened to divorce him. Stephen, fearing the consequences, snapped. In a moment of panic and rage, he brutally slit her throat, leaving her to die in their home. To cover up his crime, Stephen bribed the medical examiner, who was also his drug dealer, to falsely rule Colette's death as natural due to her previous medical condition. The police, armed with an arrest warrant, arrived at Stephen's mother's house, where he had been hiding. It was around 7:00 p.m., and the neighborhood was quiet. As the officers approached the door, Stephen, sensing that his time was up, tried to flee through the back. But the police had anticipated this and quickly apprehended him. Stephen was handcuffed and led to a squad car, his face a mix of shock and resignation. He didn't resist. It was as if he knew the inevitable had finally caught up with him. Back at the station, Stephen was formally charged with the murder of his wife, Colette Jackson. The news of his arrests sent shockwaves through the Lodi community, especially among Colette's family and friends. They had known Stephen as a devoted husband, but the revelation of his affair and the brutal nature of the crime left them in disbelief. Colette's family, devastated by the loss and betrayal, expressed a mix of relief and sorrow. They were relieved that justice was being served, but the pain of losing Colette in such a horrific way was overwhelming. Stephen's arrest also deeply affected Ernie and Angela Lagrima. Ernie was in shock, unable to believe that his secret relationship had led to such a tragedy. Angela, who had urged Stephen to confess, was heartbroken but stood by her husband, believing that he had never intended for things to end this way. As Stephen was processed and led to his cell, Marino knew the case was far from over. The trial would be the next battle, and it was clear that this story was far from its conclusion. Stephen Jackson's trial began in January 2014, drawing significant attention from the local community and media. The courtroom was packed with reporters and onlookers, all eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Caruso, 45, was determined to secure a conviction. Caruso was known for her fierce dedication to justice and had built a strong case against Stephen. She argued that Stephen had committed premeditated murder driven by fear and desperation after Colette discovered his affair with Ernie Lagrima. Caruso painted a picture of a man who would stop at nothing to keep his secret life hidden, even if it meant killing his wife. The defense, led by Stephen's attorney, Michael Friedman, 50, took a different approach. Friedman was a seasoned lawyer with a reputation for taking on challenging cases. He argued that Stephen's actions were not premeditated but the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. Friedman claimed that Stephen had acted in a fit of rage and panic, not with the intent to kill. He pointed to Stephen's clean criminal record and his role as a devoted husband and father, suggesting that this crime was out of character and not deserving of a harsh sentence. Throughout the trial, Colette's family sat in the front row, their emotions visible as they listened to the testimony. Her mother, Nancy, often wept quietly, while her father, Robert, stared straight ahead, his face a mask of grief. They had lost a daughter, and now they were witnessing the man who had taken her from them try to avoid full responsibility for his actions. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On February 15, 2014, they found Stephen Jackson guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Caruso, satisfied with the outcome, believed that justice had been served, although she had hoped for a first-degree conviction. During the sentencing, Stephen was given 25 years to life in prison. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Colette's family felt that it was not enough, believing that Stephen should have received a harsher punishment for the brutal way he had taken Colette's life. Ernie Lagrima, who had attended every day of the trial, looked devastated, knowing that their affair had led to such a tragic end. Angela, who had urged Stephen to confess, remained by her husband's side, but the toll of the trial and the sentencing was clear on her face. As Stephen was led away, the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind the echoes of a trial that had torn apart families and shaken a community. After Stephen Jackson's conviction, life changed dramatically for everyone involved. Colette's family tried to rebuild their lives, but the pain of losing her in such a violent way left a permanent scar. Her parents found solace in the support of friends and the community, but the loss of their daughter was a burden they would carry forever. They started a foundation in Colette's name, aimed at helping survivors of domestic violence, hoping to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Ernie Lagrima's life was also deeply affected. The affair that had once been his secret became public knowledge, and he faced harsh judgment from the community. Ernie, once a well-respected lawyer, found his reputation in ruins. He struggled to continue practicing law and eventually closed his practice, unable to escape the shadow of the trial. The guilt he felt over his role in the events that led to Colette's death was overwhelming. He withdrew from public life, spending most of his time in solitude, haunted by the choices he had made. Angela Lagrima, Ernie's wife, remained by his side, but their relationship was forever altered. Angela had been the one to encourage Stephen to confess, believing it was the right thing to do. However, the public scrutiny and the weight of the scandal strained their marriage. The couple moved away from Lodi, seeking a fresh start in a new town where they could leave the past behind. Despite the challenges, Angela remained committed to rebuilding their life together, though it was clear that the events had left a deep impact on both of them. Detective Frank Marino, who had led the investigation, continued his work with the Lodi Police Department. The case had been one of the most challenging of his career, and while he was proud of bringing Stephen to justice, the brutality of the crime and the pain it caused the families involved stayed with him. Marino became more vocal about the importance of mental health support for law enforcement officers, recognizing the toll that such cases could take on those tasked with solving them. Stephen Jackson, now serving his sentence in a state prison, adjusted to life behind bars. He spent much of his time in isolation, reflecting on the choices that had led him there. Stephen was a model prisoner, but the weight of his actions hung heavy on him. He occasionally received letters from Angela, who continued to check in on him, but he had little contact with the outside world. His life, once marked by a stable career and a seemingly happy marriage, was now defined by the walls of his cell and the knowledge that he had destroyed not only his life but the lives of those around him. Edith Palmer Delamere was a 70-year-old woman who led a life that many would describe as anything but ordinary. Born in Zambia to British parents, Edie grew up surrounded by the wild beauty of Africa. She eventually moved to London, where she became a model during the swinging 60s, a time when the city was the epicenter of fashion and culture. Her modeling career brought her into contact with celebrities, artists, and the elite of society. But Edie wasn't content to stay in one place. She married 4 times, each marriage more extravagant than the last, before settling down in Boynton Beach, Florida, a sunny retirement community with an average age of 62 and known for its relaxed atmosphere. Edie was a wealthy divorcee with a reputation for being a bridezilla. She had a taste for the finer things in life, whether it was her collection of designer clothes, her flashy jewelry, or her love for Bentleys. Despite her age, Edie was obsessed with youth. She spent a small fortune on cosmetic procedures to maintain her appearance and often surrounded herself with younger people, particularly men who she would entertain sexually. Her vanity was well known in Boynton Beach, no small thing, where she was often seen in the area's many high-end boutiques and beauty salons. Edie had one child, Leila Palmer Delamere, but their relationship was strained at best. Edie's controlling nature and obsession with her looks made it difficult for Leila to connect with her mother. Leila had spent years living on her own, studying Zen Buddhism in Japan, far away from Edie's shadow. When they reconnected in late 2012, the reunion was rocky. Edie, who was planning her 5th wedding to a much younger man named Richard Rick Lasker, and was more focused on her upcoming nuptials than on mending her relationship with Leila, who she privately said was, quote, an ugly little piglet. In the days leading up to her death, Edie was busy preparing for her wedding, which was to be a grand affair. She spent hours at the spa, getting treatments to ensure she looked her best, and shopped for the perfect wedding dress at high-end stores like Saks Fifth Avenue. But beneath the surface, Edie's life was far from perfect. Her obsession with youth and control over those around her had created deep rifts that, unknown to her, would end in her murder. On the morning of January 15, 2013, Boynton Beach was bathed in the warm glow of the Florida sun, a typical winter day for the quiet retirement community. But inside the upscale home of Edith Edie Palmer Delamere, something was terribly wrong. At around 9:30 a.m., Leila Palmer Delamere arrived at her mother's house, planning to discuss last-minute details for the upcoming wedding. When she entered the home, she immediately noticed how eerily quiet it was. No music playing from Edie's vintage record collection, no sounds of her bustling about. Leila felt a knot form in her stomach. Leila called out to her mother, but there was no response. Growing more anxious, she walked upstairs to Edie's lavish bedroom, a room filled with expensive furniture and walls adorned with photos from her glamorous past. What she found next was the stuff of nightmares. Edie was lying in her king-size bed, naked and lifeless. Her face, which had once been the picture of beauty and youth, was now a haunting sight. She had been shot, and in a gruesome twist, her eyes had been viciously poked out with a ballpoint pen. The shock hit Leila hard. She stood frozen, staring at the horrific scene. Then, in a panic, she grabbed her iPhone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she struggled to explain what she had just discovered. What the bleep? My mother's bleeping dead. There's blood bleeping everywhere. Gross. Leila's voice was filled with terror and disbelief as she described the scene to the emergency operator. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the peaceful morning air of the neighborhood. Officers from the Boynton Beach Police Department quickly entered the home, securing the area and instructing Leila to wait outside. Paramedics were close behind, but it was clear there was nothing they could do. Edie was already gone. As Leila stood outside the house, trying to process what had just happened, neighbors began to gather, whispering among themselves, their faces a mix of shock and concern. In a community where the biggest news was usually a neighbor's new Ferrari or an upcoming all-night orgy, the discovery of a brutal murder was unimaginable. Leila was left to grapple with the horrifying reality that her mother was dead, and the question on everyone's mind was, who could have done something so terrible, so brutal? The Boynton Beach Police Department was quick to respond to the scene after Leila Palmer Delamere's frantic 911 call on the morning of January 15, 2013. Detective Gregor Harbinski, a seasoned investigator with over 2 decades of experience, led the team. Harbinski was known for his calm demeanor and sharp eye for detail, qualities that would prove essential in this grisly case. As they arrived at Edie Palmer Delamere's luxurious home, the officers were met with a scene of disturbing violence. The crime scene was nothing short of a nightmare. Edie's bedroom, once a place of opulence, was now the site of a brutal murder. The king-size bed, adorned with satin sheets, was soaked in blood. Edie's lifeless body lay in the center, naked, with a gunshot wound to her chest. But what shocked the officers most were her eyes, brutally poked out of her like a sunny-side-up egg with a ballpoint pen. The sheer brutality of the act pointed to a deep-seated rage, suggesting the killer harbored intense hatred toward Edie. Detective Harbinski and his team began their investigation with a thorough examination of the room. They carefully bagged and tagged evidence, including the blood-stained pen, which was still lying on the floor near the bed. The crime scene unit photographed the room from every angle, capturing the horror in vivid detail. The team also dusted for fingerprints, though the presence of Edie's many sexual visitors and household staff over the years made the task more challenging. Outside, Leila sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket provided by a neighbor, her eyes red from crying. Harbinski knew she would need to be questioned, but first, he wanted to ensure the crime scene was meticulously processed. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was not a random act of violence. The method of murder and the mutilation of the victim's eyes suggested that the killer was someone who knew Edie well, someone with a personal vendetta. Given the brutal nature of the crime, Detective Harbinski contacted the FBI to bring in a criminal profiler. Dr. Camila Kapoor, a renowned psychologist specializing in violent crimes, was called to assist. After reviewing the crime scene and speaking with Harbinski, Dr. Kapoor developed a psychological profile of the killer. She believed the murderer was likely someone close to Edie, possibly a family member or one of her many sexual partners. The killer was driven by jealousy, resentment, and an overwhelming need to assert control over Edie. The act of gouging out her eyes indicated a desire to erase Edie's gaze, perhaps stemming from feelings of inadequacy or a fear of judgment. Dr. Kapoor's profile added a new layer to the investigation. It suggested that the person responsible for this horrific act was not just a cold-blooded killer, but someone deeply disturbed with a complex emotional relationship to the victim. With this new insight, the police turned their attention to those closest to Edie, determined to uncover the identity of the murderer. The police quickly focused their investigation on Leila Palmer Delamere, Edie's estranged daughter. At 34 years old, Leila had spent much of her life living in the shadow of her glamorous and demanding mother. After returning from Japan, where she had been studying Zen Buddhism for several years, Leila had hoped to find some peace, but reconnecting with Edie only seemed to reopen old wounds. Their relationship was strained at best, with Edie constantly criticizing Leila for being ugly and not living up to her standards. Leila had been struggling financially since her return to the U.S. She lived in a modest apartment in West Palm Beach and worked part-time at a local yoga studio, earning just enough to get by. She was known to be quiet and reserved, often keeping to herself. But beneath that calm exterior, those who knew Leila sensed a deep sadness and frustration. Friends noted that Leila was increasingly anxious in the months leading up to her mother's death, and she often spoke about feeling trapped and powerless in her life. The police believed that Leila had a strong motive for wanting Edie out of her life. Years of emotional abuse and feeling overshadowed by her mother's larger-than-life personality could have driven Leila to the breaking point. Moreover, the discovery that her mother was having an affair with her much younger boyfriend, Jake DeCastro, would have been the ultimate betrayal. The police theorized that Leila might have seen the murder as her only way to escape Edie's control and humiliation. Detective Gregor Harbinski brought Leila in for questioning just 2 days after the murder. During the interrogation, Leila appeared nervous but composed. She denied any involvement in her mother's death, stating that she had been at home alone chanting sutras at the time of the murder. However, her alibi was weak, with no witnesses to confirm her whereabouts. The detectives pressed her on her relationship with Edie, particularly her feelings about the affair with Jake, but Leila remained tight-lipped, refusing to engage with their line of questioning. Leila's behavior during the interrogation raised red flags for the investigators. She seemed detached, almost cold, when discussing her mother's death, which they found unusual for someone who had just lost a parent. However, there was no physical evidence directly linking Leila to the crime, and despite their suspicions, the police knew they needed more to build a solid case against her. As the investigation continued, Leila remained a prime suspect, but the lack of concrete evidence meant that the police would have to keep digging. They hoped that further examination of the crime scene and interviews with other people in Edie's life would uncover the truth behind this brutal murder. The investigation into the murder of Edie Palmer Delamere next led the police to Jake DeCastro, an 18-year-old with quite the complicated life. Jake, an undocumented immigrant from Argentina, had been living in Boynton Beach for several months by January 2013. He worked odd jobs, including landscaping and dishwashing, earning just enough to get by. Despite his rough circumstances, Jake was known for his charm, particularly with women, and his good looks made him a local heartthrob among the area's many old and sexually frustrated rich women. Jake's relationship with Leila Palmer Delamere, Edie's daughter, was complex. Lila, 16 years older, had taken the vulnerable young Jake in, providing him with a place to stay, some money every now and then, and protection from immigration authorities. In return, Jake offered sex, although he saw the relationship as more transactional than romantic. Jake's dreams were modest. He wanted to build a stable life in America, perhaps save enough money to start his own stand selling empanadas by the beach one day. But his immigration status made everything uncertain. Edie Palmer Delamere's blatant sexual interest in Jake added another layer of tension. According to those who knew them, Edie had developed a lurid fascination with the young man. She was known for her attraction to hot younger men, and Jake was no exception. She had reportedly lavished him with gifts, including Rolex watches and an Armani suit, and had hinted at a future together if he dumped her daughter for her. For Jake, this was a tempting offer. Edie was much wealthier than Leila, and a relationship with her could mean a life he had never imagined, and perhaps even that empanada stand. When the police brought Jake in for questioning, they found him nervous and evasive. He avoided direct answers, often shifting the conversation away from his relationship with Leila. He did, however, admit to having a sexual relationship with Edie, but claimed it was purely physical, and that he had never had any love for her, intended to pursue her as long as she would give him things. Jake insisted that he had been with friends on the night of the murder, drinking at a local cantina, but his alibi was weak, with no one able to confirm his whereabouts for the entire evening. The detectives were suspicious of Jake's motives. They knew he had a lot to gain from Edie's death, especially if she had promised him a share of her substantial wealth. But as they pressed him further, Jake remained calm, though clearly uncomfortable. He denied any involvement in Edie's murder, repeatedly stating that he had no reason to harm her. The police, however, weren't convinced. They believed Jake might have been desperate enough to commit the crime, hoping to secure a future that had always seemed out of reach. Despite their suspicions, the police couldn't find any physical evidence linking Jake to the murder. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and no witnesses placing him at the scene. Jake the Castro remained a person of interest. But without more concrete evidence, the investigators knew they needed to look elsewhere for answers. The investigation into Edie Palmer Delamere's murder also pointed the police toward Richard "Rick" Lasker, Edie's 45-year-old fiancé. Rick was a local businessman who had met Edie at a charity event in late 2012. Their whirlwind romance quickly led to an engagement, despite their significant 25-year age difference. Friends and neighbors in Boynton Beach described Rick as a man with a charming exterior, but those who knew him better often spoke of his quick temper and financial troubles. Rick had been struggling to keep his business afloat. He owned a small chain of used car dealerships across South Florida, but by January 2013, the business was bleeding money. The recession that had rocked the U.S. economy a few years earlier still had lingering effects, and Rick was desperate for a financial lifeline. When he met Edie, a wealthy widow with a substantial savings and an insatiable sexual hunger for men, it seemed like his problems were over. But their relationship was far from smooth. Despite planning a wedding, Rick and Edie had a contentious relationship. Edie was known for her controlling behavior, often treating Rick more like an employee or sex slave than a partner. The couple frequently argued, especially over the prenuptial agreement Edie insisted on. She wanted to protect her fortune, while Rick, already drowning in debt, saw the prenup as a potential barrier to financial security. Their disagreements became so intense that neighbors reported hearing shouting matches from Edie's home in the days leading up to her death. When the police brought Rick in for questioning, he appeared calm but guarded. He denied any involvement in Edie's murder, claiming that despite their arguments, he genuinely loved her. Rick provided an alibi for the night of the murder, stating that he had been entertaining potential business partners at a strip club in Miami. However, when detectives checked his alibi, they found inconsistencies. The meeting he mentioned was real, but it had ended hours before Edie was killed, leaving a significant gap in Rick's timeline. The police were particularly interested in Rick's potential motive. Edie's wealth was a powerful incentive, especially given Rick's financial woes. If she had died before the wedding, Rick stood to gain nothing due to the prenup. But if he could somehow make her death look like an accident or orchestrate it in a way that benefited him, Rick could walk away with a substantial inheritance. As detectives pressed Rick on these points, his calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, insisting that his financial problems were under control and that he had no reason to harm Edie. But the police weren't convinced. They knew Rick had a lot to lose if the marriage didn't go through, and they suspected he might have been willing to take drastic measures to secure his future. Despite their suspicions, the police didn't have enough evidence to charge Rick with the murder. However, his shaky alibi and financial motives kept him firmly in their sights as they continued the investigation. On the morning of January 24, 2013, Boynton Beach was experiencing one of its rare chilly days, with temperatures dipping into the 50s. It was during this unusual cold spell that a significant breakthrough occurred in the investigation of Edie Palmer Delamere's murder. Detective Karen Martins, who had been tirelessly combing through Edie's personal effects, discovered something unusual in Edie's bedside drawer, a torn piece of a handwritten note. The note was crumpled and shoved to the back, as if someone had tried to dispose of it in haste. The note, though incomplete, contained a few lines that caught the detective's attention. The handwriting matched Edie's, and the content hinted at a heated argument. The remaining legible words included Rick, betrayal, will, and an expletive. These fragments suggested that Edie might have been in the process of altering her will or had discovered something unsettling about her fiancé, Rick Lasker. The discovery of this note added a new dimension to the investigation, reinforcing suspicions that the motive for Edie's murder was financial. With this new evidence in hand, the police revisited Rick Lasker's financial records and discovered that he had recently made a large purchase, an expensive engagement ring that he had claimed was a gift for Edie. However, the timing of the purchase was suspicious. Rick had bought the ring just days before Edie's death, despite his well-known financial troubles. This raised the question, was Rick trying to appease Edie, or was it part of a larger plan to manipulate her before her death? The detectives also decided to send the torn note to the lad for further analysis. They wanted to see if they could recover any additional writing on the missing portion, which could provide more insight into Edie's state of mind or her intentions regarding her will. Additionally, they requested a forensic examination of the handwriting to confirm that the note was indeed written by Edie and not forged by someone else. The discovery of the note and the questionable ring purchase put Rick back under intense scrutiny. The police were now more convinced than ever that Rick had something to hide. They increased their surveillance on him, hoping to catch any slip-up that might lead to a confession or more concrete evidence. As the investigation deepened, the police continued to piece together the puzzle, knowing that time was running out to solve the case before it grew cold. The torn note and the engagement ring were pivotal in pushing the investigation forward, but the detectives knew they still needed more to definitively connect Rick to Edie's murder. On the evening of January 30, 2013, as Boynton Beach residents bundled up against the unseasonably cold weather, the police made a crucial breakthrough in the case. After weeks of intense investigation, they had finally gathered enough evidence to identify Edith Edie Palmer Delamere's murderer, her own daughter, Leila Palmer Delamere. Leila, a 34-year-old woman with a troubled past, had always lived in the shadow of her flamboyant and domineering mother. The investigation revealed that Leila had been struggling with deep-seated resentment toward Edie for years. But it wasn't until she discovered her boyfriend, Jake DeCastro, was cheating on her with her own mother that her jealousy and rage reached a fatal boiling point. The police uncovered that Leila had purchased a .38 caliber revolver just days before her mother's death. This fact, combined with the forensic evidence, ballistic tests that matched the bullets found at the crime scene to the revolver, provided the police with the critical link they needed. Furthermore, detectives found Leila's fingerprints on the ballpoint pen used to mutilate Edie's eyes, a detail that revealed the deep hatred she harbored. On the night of Edie's murder, Leila confronted her mother about the affair. Enraged and feeling utterly betrayed, she shot Edie while she was naked in bed, then proceeded to desecrate her body in a fit of blind fury. Her motive was clear. Leila wanted to punish her mother for the ultimate betrayal and eliminate the woman who had overshadowed her entire life. The police arrested Leila at her modest apartment in West Palm Beach. When the officers arrived, she was calm, almost resigned, as if she had been expecting them. She offered no resistance and simply stated, "You bleeping got me." Her reaction was devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the viciousness of her crime. Leila's arrest sent shockwaves through the local community. Edie's fiancé, Rick Lasker, who had initially been under suspicion, expressed his relief but was devastated by the betrayal within the family. Friends and neighbors of Edie, who had once admired her for her larger-than-life personality, were stunned to learn that her own daughter was behind the brutal killing. As Leila was led away in handcuffs, the case that had gripped Boynton Beach was one step closer to being resolved. But for those who knew Edie, the tragedy of her murder at the hands of her own flesh and blood would leave a lasting scar on the community. Leila Palmer Delamere's trial for the murder of her mother, Edith Edie Palmer Delamere, began on July 15, 2013, at the Palm Beach County Courthouse. The trial quickly became the talk of Boynton Beach, with locals following the proceedings closely, eager to see justice served. The prosecution was led by Assistant State Attorney Jennifer Wright-Ponzar, a seasoned prosecutor known for her tough, no-nonsense approach in the courtroom. Wright-Ponzar argued that Leila had coldly and deliberately planned her mother's murder out of deep-seated jealousy and anger. She highlighted the evidence, including the revolver Leila had purchased and the forensic proof linking her to the crime. Wright emphasized how Leila's resentment had been festering for years, culminating in this tragic act of violence. On the other side, Leila's defense attorney, Paul Adams, a well-known public defender in South Florida, painted a different picture. He argued that Leila's mental state had been severely compromised at the time of the murder, driven by years of emotional abuse and manipulation by her mother. Adams suggested that Leila was pushed to the brink, acting in a moment of uncontrollable rage rather than premeditated malice. He called expert witnesses to testify about Leila's history of depression and anxiety, which had worsened after discovering her boyfriend's affair with Edie. Throughout the trial, Edie's friends and former acquaintances filled the courtroom, watching with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. Some had known Edie as a vibrant, if sometimes difficult, personality, and they struggled to reconcile the image of the glamorous socialite with the brutal crime. On August 2, 2013, after just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Leila to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, Leila remained expressionless, while her former boyfriend, Jake DeCastro, who had testified during the trial, looked on with visible relief. The verdict brought a sense of closure to the case, but opinions were divided. Some in Boynton Beach felt that justice had been served, while others believed that Leila's life sentence was too harsh, given the circumstances of her mental health and the toxic relationship with her mother. For Edie's friends and family, the trial's outcome was bittersweet, a reminder of the deep wounds left by the crime. After the trial, life in Boynton Beach slowly returned to normal, but the shadows of Edie Palmer Delamere's murder lingered. Leila Palmer Delamere began serving her life sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Ocala, Florida. Reports indicated that Leila struggled to adjust to prison life, grappling with depression and isolation. Despite her legal team's efforts to appeal the sentence, there was little hope for Leila's release. Jake DeCastro, Leila's former boyfriend, tried to move on with his life. He left Boynton Beach and returned to Argentina, where he started over, away from the scandal that had consumed his life in Florida. In Argentina, Jake kept a low profile, working various odd jobs to make ends meet, far from the wealth and comfort he had sought during his affair with Edie. Rick Lasker, Edie's former fiancé, also tried to rebuild his life. The death of Edie and the subsequent trial had left him financially drained, and he was forced to sell the lavish Boynton Beach home they had planned to share. He moved to a smaller condo in Delray Beach, where he lived a quieter, more subdued life. Rick distanced himself from the social scene that he and Edie had once dominated, becoming something of a recluse. For Edie's friends and acquaintances, the glamorous parties and social gatherings of the past were a distant memory. Her death had cast a long shadow over Boynton Beach's elite circles, and many who had once been close to her found themselves reevaluating their own lives and relationships, seeking to avoid the kind of tragic ending that had befallen Edie and Leila. Samantha Huang, a 28-year-old personal assistant, lived a life that seemed straight out of a glossy magazine. Residing in the affluent town of Walnut Creek, Samantha was renowned for her opulent lifestyle, adorned in the finest designer clothing and indulging in a world of luxury. Her presence was a constant spectacle, capturing the attention of those who craved a glimpse into her seemingly perfect existence. Behind the facade of confidence, however, Samantha battled deep-rooted insecurities and an insatiable craving for validation. Her relentless pursuit of attention fueled her personal and professional life, propelling her towards success while leaving a trail of envious acquaintances in her wake. Samantha's life was a captivating blend of glamour and ambition. She frequented trendy restaurants, mingling with influential figures in the fashion and entertainment industry. Her social circle boasted celebrities, socialites, and power players, all eager to bask in the radiance of her charismatic persona. As we dig deeper into Samantha's life, we uncover the intricate web of relationships that surrounded her. Rumors of a love triangle emerge, pitting Samantha against two individuals vying for her affections. The tension and jealousy that simmered beneath the surface would ultimately lead to a devastating outcome. On the chilling evening of November 17, 2002, tragedy struck the quiet town of Walnut Creek, California, as the lifeless body of Samantha Huang, a 28-year-old personal assistant, was discovered under mysterious circumstances. The rain poured relentlessly, adding to the somber atmosphere that engulfed the crime scene. It was around 7:30 p.m. when Patty Snarlbrook, a 91-year-old passerby, unintentionally stumbled upon the horrifying sight that would forever haunt her. As Patty made her way home, her frail frame braving the elements, she noticed a peculiar disturbance near a dimly lit park. Curiosity piqued, she approached cautiously, her heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. As Patty drew closer, her eyes widened in shock and disbelief. There, lying on the cold, wet pavement, was the lifeless form of Samantha Huang. The scene was reminiscent of a noir film, with the raindrops falling like tears from the sky, mirroring the sorrow felt by those who would soon learn of Samantha's tragic fate. Patty, a woman of advanced age but sharp intellect, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Panic set in as she fumbled for her cell phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. Her voice quivered as she relayed the grim discovery to the emergency operator, her words punctuated by the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the air, signaling the arrival of the authorities. The scene quickly transformed into a hive of activity as police officers and forensic experts descended upon the crime scene. Yellow crime scene tape was stretched across the alleyway, marking it as a place of tragedy and intrigue. As investigators meticulously combed through the evidence, the media frenzy surrounding the case intensified. The murder of Samantha Huang had become a captivating mystery that captivated the Bay Area, leaving no one untouched by its chilling implications. The police wasted no time in responding to the report of Samantha Huang's lifeless body. Detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez arrived at the scene, their faces grim with determination. The rain poured down relentlessly, adding to the somber atmosphere that hung over the crime scene. The location where Samantha's body was discovered was a secluded spot in a Walnut Creek park. The park, usually a place of tranquility and leisure, had now become the center of a macabre investigation. Yellow police tape cordoned off the area, preventing curious onlookers from getting too close. As the detectives approached the crime scene, they could see the unmistakable stain of blood on the ground. It was a chilling sight, a stark contrast against the wet grass and fallen leaves. The rain had washed away some of the evidence, but there were still enough clues for the investigators to work with. The first step was to secure the area and ensure that no evidence was disturbed. Detective Laughlin carefully placed markers next to each significant item, meticulously documenting their position. He then directed the crime scene technicians to begin their work. The forensic team, dressed in white protective suits, started their search for clues. They meticulously combed through the area, collecting samples of the soil, leaves, and any other potential evidence. Every step was taken with utmost care, as even the smallest detail could prove crucial in solving the case. Detective Ramirez focused her attention on Samantha's personal belongings. She carefully examined the victim's handbag, searching for any items that may provide insight into her life and potential motives for her murder. Among the contents, she found a receipt from a local jewelry store, indicating that Samantha had recently purchased an expensive necklace. Could this purchase be connected to her untimely demise? Meanwhile, Detective Laughlin interviewed witnesses who frequented the park. He spoke to joggers, dog walkers, and anyone who might have seen something out of the ordinary on that fateful day. One witness mentioned seeing a suspicious-looking man lurking near the crime scene, but his description was vague, leaving the detectives with more questions than answers. As the investigation progressed, the detectives faced the challenge of piecing together the puzzle of Samantha's murder. With each passing day, the pressure mounted to solve the case and bring justice to Samantha and her grieving loved ones. Daniel Dan Tearsbeek, a 32-year-old business executive, found himself at the center of a storm of suspicion surrounding the tragic murder of Samantha Huang. Known for his charm and influential connections, Dan was no stranger to the glitz and glamour of the high-flying lifestyle that Samantha reveled in. However, beneath his polished exterior, a web of secrets and guilt threatened to unravel. As the investigation unfolded, the police focused their attention on Dan, meticulously dissecting his every move and motive. The media frenzy surrounding the case only intensified the scrutiny on him. Reporters camped outside his upscale apartment building, eager to capture any glimpse of the man who was entangled in this deadly love triangle. In the interrogation room, Dan's carefully crafted facade began to crack. Under the relentless questioning of Detective Laughlin, beads of sweat formed on Dan's forehead, betraying his inner turmoil. The detective pressed him on the nature of his relationship with Samantha, the extent of their involvement, and any potential motive for her murder. Dan's voice trembled as he denied any wrongdoing, insisting that he had nothing to do with Samantha's untimely demise. He recounted their passionate affair, painting a picture of a torrid love affair that had consumed them both. He spoke of the nights spent at exclusive restaurants, the lavish gifts he showered upon her, and the trips they took to Hawaii and Las Vegas. But the detectives were not easily swayed by Dan's words. They delved deep into his financial records, uncovering a series of suspicious transactions that raised eyebrows. Large sums of money had been transferred from his accounts in the weeks leading up to Samantha's murder. The police wondered if these funds were used to hire a hitman or to cover up any evidence of his involvement. But amidst the media frenzy, justice remained the ultimate goal. The detectives meticulously gathered evidence, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of the truth. They were determined to unveil the dark secrets that lay hidden beneath the glossy surface of Samantha's glamorous life. In the investigation into the tragic murder of Samantha Huang, another suspect emerged, Emily Tearspeak, the 34-year-old wife of Dan Tearspeak. Emily seemed to embody the picture-perfect suburban wife, with her neatly manicured lawn, charming smile, and her beloved chihuahua, Carl J. Wertheimer. However, beneath her demure facade, a seething rage towards Samantha lurked. Emily saw Samantha as a threat to her marriage, a woman who had captivated her husband's attention and shattered the tranquility of their once harmonious life. Consumed by jealousy, Emily meticulously devised a plan to eliminate her romantic rival, leaving no stone unturned in her quest for vengeance. The police, led by detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez, delved into Emily's background, seeking to uncover the truth behind her seemingly innocent exterior. They discovered a woman who had meticulously crafted a facade of suburban bliss, but harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Samantha. As the investigators delved deeper, they discovered a trove of evidence that pointed towards Emily's involvement in Samantha's murder. They found a series of incriminating text messages exchanged between Emily and a mysterious contact known only as R. These messages revealed a sinister plot to poison Samantha with a lethal dose of arsenic, cunningly laced in her favorite champagne. The journal contained chilling entries, describing in meticulous detail the steps Emily had taken to ensure Samantha's demise. During the police interrogation, Emily's demeanor oscillated between calm denials and moments of intense anger. She vehemently denied any involvement in Samantha's death, claiming the texts and the journal entries were a private fantasy meant to relieve her anger. But her carefully constructed facade began to crumble under the intense interrogation against her. As the investigation continued, the detectives meticulously pieced together the puzzle, connecting the dots between Emily's motive, her actions, and the tragic outcome. The police published a preliminary investigation report, written at a fourth-grade vocabulary level of the insured that even the youngest readers could understand the gravity of the situation. As the investigation into Samantha Huang's murder continued, a surprising suspect emerged from the shadows. Tiffany Watson, a 25-year-old receptionist and co-worker of Samantha. Tiffany's resentment towards Samantha's success and glamorous lifestyle had been simmering beneath the surface for months, and now the police had reason to believe that her envy had driven her to commit a heinous crime. Tiffany, with her long brown hair and piercing blue eyes, seemed like an unlikely suspect. She often wore a fake smile and spoke in a soft, innocent voice that could easily deceive those around her. But the detectives saw through her facade and were determined to uncover the truth. During the police interrogation, Tiffany's demeanor shifted between feigned innocence and veiled hostility. She tried to downplay her rivalry with Samantha, claiming that they were just co-workers and that she had no reason to harm her. But the evidence told a different story. The detectives discovered that Tiffany had been secretly stalking Samantha for months. She had meticulously collected newspaper clippings and magazine articles featuring Samantha's success, pinning them to a corkboard in her small apartment. The board was covered in red string, connecting the articles in a web of envy and obsession. Furthermore, the detectives found a diary hidden under Tiffany's mattress. Its pages were filled with delirious, sexually explicit and disturbing entries detailing Tiffany's growing hatred and sexual attraction towards Samantha. She wrote about how Samantha's designer clothes and luxurious lifestyle made her feel inferior and how she would do anything to bring Samantha down. The detectives also uncovered a receipt from a local pharmacy dated November 10, 2002. The receipt showed that Tiffany had purchased a bottle of arsenic, the same deadly poison that had ended Samantha's life. The detectives also found traces of arsenic in Tiffany's apartment, linking her directly to the murder. As the evidence mounted against her, Tiffany's composed demeanor began to crumble. She became more agitated, her voice trembling as she continued to deny any involvement in Samantha's death. She claimed she had bought the bottle of arsenic to kill herself, The investigation into Samantha Huang's murder had taken a dark turn, revealing how love, envy, and betrayal that can exist together within the human heart. The detectives' relentless pursuit of justice had brought them closer to the truth, but there were still unanswered questions. What other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface? After an intense and painstaking investigation, the truth behind Samantha Huang's untimely demise finally was unveiled. The culprit responsible for this heinous crime was none other than Emily Tearsbeek, the wife of Samantha's wealthy lover, Dan Tearsbeek. Emily, a seemingly ordinary 34-year-old woman, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Samantha. She perceived Samantha as a threat to her marriage and meticulously devised a plan to eliminate her romantic rival. Consumed by a toxic mix of jealousy and betrayal, Emily cunningly poisoned Samantha with a lethal dose of arsenic, cleverly laced in her favorite champagne. The police, led by detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez, left no stone unturned in their quest for justice. Their relentless pursuit of the truth led them to uncover crucial evidence that ultimately pointed to Emily as the mastermind behind this chilling murder. As the investigation intensified, the detectives interrogated Emily, unmasking her manipulative nature and her willingness to go to extreme lengths to eliminate her competition. Emily's responses ranged from calm denials to moments of intense anger, painting a complex portrait of a woman driven by envy and consumed by her own dark desires. The arrest of Emily Tearsbeek sent shockwaves through the wealthy community of Walnut Creek, California, leaving friends and neighbors stunned by the revelation that a seemingly ordinary woman could be capable of such a heinous act. Samantha's family, though devastated by their loss, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. As the trial of Emily Tearsbeek looms on the horizon, the community eagerly awaits the day when she will face the consequences of her actions. In the end, Samantha's vibrant spirit lives on, a reminder of the tragic consequences that can arise from the darkest corners of the human psyche. The legacy of this case will forever serve as a cautionary tale, reminding us all of the importance of trust, loyalty, and the devastating consequences that can arise when these values are forsaken. The trial that ensued after Samantha Huang's tragic murder in November 2002 captivated the area, with media outlets like KGO and CanTV closely following the proceedings. Emily Tearsbeek, the mastermind behind the twisted plot to eliminate her husband's mistress, stood at the center of the courtroom, her fate hanging in the balance. In a packed courtroom, the prosecution presented a meticulously crafted case against Emily, led by the formidable prosecutor Tabitha Quasimodo. Quasimodo, known for her tenacity and unwavering dedication to justice, left no stone unturned in her pursuit of the truth. She skillfully weaved together witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and a compelling narrative that painted Emily as a calculating and cold-blooded murderer. The defense attorney, Michael Laraboots, fought tirelessly to protect his client's interests. Laraboots, renowned for his ability to sway juries with his persuasive arguments, employed every legal tactic in his arsenal to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. He called into question the reliability of the evidence, challenged the credibility of witnesses, and attempted to create a narrative that placed the blame elsewhere. Samantha's family, clad in somber attire, sat in the front row, their eyes fixed on the proceedings. The weight of their loss was palpable, and their hope for justice was intertwined with a sense of grief that seemed insurmountable. The courtroom itself buzzed with tension, as the public and media awaited the verdict that would determine Emily's fate. After weeks of gripping testimony and impassioned arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. Their decision would shape the lives of both the victims and the perpetrators' families, and the nation held its breath in anticipation. Finally, the verdict was delivered. Emily Tearsbeek was found guilty on all charges. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom as the gravity of the decision sunk in. Samantha's family, though relieved that justice was served, struggled to find solace in the knowledge that their beloved daughter and sister could never be brought back. The sentencing phase of the trial commenced, and emotions ran high. The prosecution argued for a sentence that reflected the heinous nature of the crime, citing the pain and suffering inflicted upon Samantha and her loved ones. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded for leniency, highlighting Emily's lack of prior criminal history and her potential for rehabilitation. Ultimately, the judge, Honorable William Galville Gavelson, delivered the sentence. Emily Thiersbeek was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief, anger, and sadness. The impact of the verdict reverberated through the lives of all those involved, leaving a lasting scar that would never fully heal. As the trial concluded, the media frenzy surrounding the case gradually subsided, but the memory of Samantha Huang and the chilling tale of betrayal, jealousy, and revenge would forever remain etched in the annals of crime history. In the aftermath of the highly publicized trial, the lives of those involved in the Samantha Huang murder case took unexpected turns. For Daniel Dan Thiersbeek, the wealthy businessman who had been entangled in a deadly love triangle, life would never be the same. The trial had exposed his infidelity and shattered his marriage to Emily Thiersbeek. Dan, now a recluse, was rarely seen in public, preferring to spend his days in his secluded mansion overlooking the picturesque hills of Walnut Creek. His once thriving business empire had crumbled under the weight of scandal, leaving him a shadow of his former self. Meanwhile, Emily Thompson, the mastermind behind the twisted plot, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her days were now spent behind cold steel bars, contemplating the consequences of her actions. The monotony of prison life was a stark contrast to the glamorous world she had once inhabited. The media circus that had surrounded the trial had moved on to other sensational stories, leaving Emily to face the harsh reality of her choices alone. As for Samantha's family, the wounds of her untimely death were still fresh. They had found solace in each other's company and the support of their close-knit community. The Samantha Huang Foundation, established in her memory, had become a beacon of hope for victims of domestic violence. Through their tireless efforts, the foundation provided resources and support to those in need, ensuring that Samantha's legacy lived on. The police officers who had tirelessly worked on the case, Detectives Julian Laughlin and Carolina Ramirez, were commended for their dedication and professionalism. Their meticulous investigation had brought justice to Samantha and closure to her grieving family. Their names would forever be etched in the annals of crime history, remembered as the heroes who had unraveled the truth behind the chilling murder. As the years passed, the Samantha Huang murder case faded from the headlines, becoming a distant memory for most. The once bustling streets of Walnut Creek returned to their peaceful existence, with residents going about their daily lives. The scars left by the tragic events of November 2002 would always remain, a reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can lurk within the human heart. Melanie Varela, a 20-year-old from Sherbrooke, Quebec, found herself attending the University of Virginia and working as a nanny during her summer break. This dedicated and ambitious young woman was driven by her dreams of becoming a successful lawyer. Melanie had a loving family back in Canada and was known for her kind and compassionate nature. It was the summer of 1999, and Charlottesville, Virginia was buzzing with excitement. The city was preparing for a concert at the University of Virginia's Scott Stadium. The event was highly anticipated, with fans flocking from all over the country to witness the renowned musical extravaganza. In the midst of this vibrant atmosphere, Melanie found herself employed by the wealthy Hartsfeld family. They were prominent members of the community who lived in a grand mansion on the outskirts of town, surrounded by sprawling gardens and a white picket fence. Melanie's days were filled with taking care of the Hartsfeld's child, Mei Ling, adopted from China. She would wake up early in the morning to prepare breakfast, help with school assignments, and engage in various outdoor activities. The girl adored Melanie, and she quickly became an integral part of their lives. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family, there were whispers of tension and secrets. Rumors circulated among the local gossip mill, hinting at marital discord and financial troubles within the household. As the days turned into weeks, Melanie's curiosity grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Determined to uncover the truth, she discreetly began snooping around the house, searching for any clues that might shed light on the Thompsons' hidden secrets. Little did Melanie know her quest for the truth would lead her down a dark and treacherous path, forever changing the course of her life. On the ominous afternoon of June 2, 1999, the quiet town of Charlottesville, Virginia, was shrouded in an atmosphere of unease. Dark clouds ominously loomed overhead, mirroring the impending tragedy that was about to unfold. As the day wore on, tension mounted within the Hartsfeld residence. The once peaceful home now held a sinister secret, unbeknownst to Melanie Varela, a diligent and driven 20-year-old student from Sherbrooke, Quebec, who had been working as a nanny for the affluent Hartsfeld family during her summer break from the University of Virginia. Little did she know that her life was about to take a tragic turn, forever altering the lives of those around her. It was in the dimly lit basement of the Hartsfeld family's opulent mansion that Melanie's lifeless body was discovered. The shocking find was made by Jane La Salvador, a Brazilian maid employed by the family. Startled and trembling, Janela wasted no time in alerting the authorities, her voice quivering with fear as she recounted the horrifying scene she had stumbled upon. Gossip about Melanie's untimely demise spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community of Charlottesville. As the investigation unfolded, details would emerge. The basement, once a place of storage and solace, had become a haunting crime scene. The authorities meticulously combed through the area, searching for any clues that would shed light on the events leading to Melanie's tragic demise. In this small town, where everyone seemed to know each other, the tragic death of Melanie Varela shattered the illusion of safety. The once peaceful streets now felt haunted, as the community grappled with the chilling reality that a dark secret had been lurking within their midst. On June 2, 1999, Charlottesville, Virginia, a city usually steeped in the idyllic charm of Southern history and academia, was rocked by a grisly discovery. In the basement of a stately home on the prestigious Maplewood Drive, the lifeless body of Melanie Varela, a 20-year-old University of Virginia student and part-time nanny, was found. The scene was one of unmitigated horror. Varela had been savagely murdered, her throat slit in a violent act that left the community reeling. The Charlottesville Police Department, led by seasoned detectives Smith and Ramirez, descended upon the Hartsfeld residence with a sense of urgency that matched the gravity of the crime. The family, prominent in local academic circles, was now at the center of a murder investigation that would grip the city for months to come. As the detectives navigated the blood-spattered basement, the evidence of a struggle was undeniable. Amidst the chaos, a picture of the victim began to emerge. Varela, known for her academic ambition and compassionate nature, had been living a double life with members of the Hartsfeld family. As the investigation unfolded, local media outlets like the Daily Progress and Duty Ina Radio provided coverage, drawing parallels to the infamous Ramsey case that had captivated the nation just a few years prior. The community, still reeling from the shock, could hardly believe that such a crime could occur in their midst, in a city where the biggest concerns were often which historical tour to take or whether the Cavaliers would win their next game. The case of Melanie Varela, with its blend of academic prestige and sordid secrets, would become a fixture in the annals of true crime in Charlottesville, a stark reminder that no place, no matter how picturesque, is immune to the darker aspects of human nature. In the quiet college town of Charlottesville, Virginia, a scandalous liaison turned deadly when Melanie Varela, a 20-year-old University of Virginia student, was found murdered. The prime suspect, James Hartsfeld, a 44-year-old physics professor renowned for his academic prowess, but now under scrutiny for his clandestine affairs. Hartsfeld, who had been nurturing a secret sexual relationship with Varela while she nannied his adopted daughter, Mei Ling, became the focal point of a sensational investigation. As detectives delved into the professor's private life, they uncovered a web of deceit that extended far beyond the ivy-covered walls of academia. The case, which unfolded in the summer of 1999, captivated the nation. It was a time when the world was gripped by the fear of the impending Y2K bug, and the media was still reeling from the sensational coverage of the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. Amidst this backdrop, the Hartsfeld case emerged as a stark reminder of the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic university life. Detectives Smith and Ramirez, seasoned investigators with the Charlottesville Police Department, interrogated Hartsfeld with a calculated intensity. They probed his alibis, dissected his interactions with Varela, and scrutinized every facet of his personal life. Hartsfeld's reactions, a volatile cocktail of anger and denial, only served to heighten suspicions. As the interrogation wore on, the evidence against Hartzfeld mounted. A torn ticket stub from the hit movie The Matrix hinted at a premeditated alibi, and whispers of Hartzfeld's affinity for the then-popular Tommy Hilfiger Hager painted a picture of a man caught between the facade of respectability and the allure of forbidden pleasures. The case against James Hartzfeld was quickly becoming irrefutable, and the once respected professor found himself ensnared in a narrative that seemed straight out of a Dateline mystery. As the investigation continued, the question on everyone's mind was whether justice would be served in the court of law or if the court of public opinion had already sealed Hartzfeld's fate. In the serene town of Charlottesville, a veneer of tranquility was shattered by a heinous crime that gripped the community. Paula Hartzfeld, a prominent figure in the literary circles of Charlottesville, Virginia, found herself entangled in a scandalous investigation following the brutal murder of Melanie Varela, a young nanny employed by the Hartzfeld family. Paula, known for her erudite literary symposiums that often featured esteemed authors and captivated Charlottesville's intellectual elite, seemed an unlikely participant in such a sordid affair. Yet beneath the surface of her cultivated exterior, a different narrative was unfolding, one that would challenge the public's perception of her. The police, delving into the intricacies of Melanie's life, uncovered a clandestine sexual relationship between Paula and the victim. This revelation came as a shock to those who knew Paula as the wife of James Hartzfeld, a respected physics professor, and the mother to Mainling, their adopted daughter from China. During the interrogation, Paula's composure wavered under the weight of the detective's probing questions. Her unease was palpable, her answers laced with defensiveness. The detectives, seasoned in the art of discernment, noted the subtle shifts in her demeanor, her fleeting glances, the nervous tapping of her fingers, and the inconsistency in her recounting of the events leading up to Melanie's death. As the investigation deepened, the media frenzy intensified. Local news outlets like the Daily Progress began to speculate on the dynamics within the Hartzfeld household. The community watched, riveted, as the case unfolded, bearing witness to a tragedy that would leave an indelible mark on the town's history. The scrutiny of Paula Hartzfeld's role in this grim saga continued, with the authorities piecing together a timeline that suggested a motive rooted in jealousy and betrayal. The question on everyone's mind: could a woman of Paula's stature be capable of such a crime? Or was there more to the story than met the eye? In the investigation of Melanie Varela's murder, a pivotal discovery was made that would cast a new light on the case. The Charlottesville Police Department, in a meticulous search of the Hartzfeld residence, uncovered a diary belonging to the victim. This personal journal, filled with sexually explicit details and confessions, became a key piece of evidence, revealing the complex web of relationships Melanie had entwined with each member of the Hartzfeld family. The diary entries painted a vivid picture of Melanie's life and her interactions with each member of the family. It chronicled her secret sexual liaisons and the emotional turmoil that accompanied them. The police, combing through the pages, found references to clandestine meetings, sexual acts, and a growing sense of fear as Melanie became aware of the precariousness of her situation. Detectives Smith and Ramirez, leading the investigation, approached the diary with the precision of forensic analysts. They cross-referenced dates, events, and encounters, corroborating the diary's accounts with other collected evidence. The diary's revelations were damning, implicating not just one, but all members of the Hartzfeld family in a sordid saga of manipulation and deceit. The media, including local outlets like WVIR NBC 29, were quick to pick up on the story. The diary's contents became fodder for speculation and analysis as reporters dissected its entries, seeking to understand the motives behind the murder. As the diary's secrets unfolded, the community of Charlottesville watched in disbelief. The University of Virginia, an institution known for its honor code and academic integrity, was now at the center of a scandal that defied comprehension. The Hartzfeld family, once respected members of the academic and literary community, were now suspects in a crime that had shattered the peace of this quiet college town. The investigation into the brutal murder of Melanie Varela took a dramatic turn as attention shifted to Kevin Hartzfeld, the 22-year-old son of James and Paula Hartzfeld. A recent graduate from the University of Virginia, Kevin's involvement with Melanie was as complex as it was secretive. Detectives Smith and Ramirez, experienced in the psychological nuances of interrogation, sat across from Kevin in the store room at the Charlottesville Police Department. The air was thick with tension as they began their questioning, seeking to peel back the layers of Kevin's relationship with Melanie. Kevin, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, oscillated between anger and palpable fear. His voice, when he spoke, betrayed the turmoil within. The detectives pressed on, their questions sharp and unyielding, cutting to the heart of the matter. They probed for details about his illicit affair with Melanie, an affair that had been kept hidden from the prying eyes of the public. The interrogation revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. Kevin, like his parents, had been ensnared in a web of sexual deceit with Melanie. The police uncovered evidence of their sexual encounters, each one meticulously documented in a perverse scorecard the family maintained. The Hartsfeld residence, once a symbol of academic achievement and cultural sophistication, was now the epicenter of a scandalous murder investigation. The family's dark secret, once confined to the pages of Melanie's diary, was now laid bare for the world to see. With each passing moment, the walls closed in on Kevin Hartsfeld. The evidence mounted, and the reality of his situation became increasingly clear. The young man, who had once walked the halls of academia with pride, now faced the possibility of a life behind bars. In the quiet college town of Charlottesville, Virginia, a sinister plot unraveled within the walls of the Hartsfeld home, culminating in the tragic demise of Melanie Varela. The investigation into her murder took a dramatic turn when detectives uncovered the involvement of not one, but all three members of the Hartsfeld family. James Hartsfeld, a respected physics professor, his wife Paula, known for her literary gatherings, and their son Kevin, a recent college graduate, were all implicated in the crime. The trio had been entangled in a web of illicit sexual relationships with Melanie, each seeking to have secret sex with her in turn. Their clandestine sex was meticulously recorded in a scorecard of their sexual encounters with her, a chilling testament to the twisted sexual competition that had developed among them. The discovery of this scorecard was a pivotal moment in the case, as it exposed the lengths to which the Hartsfelds would go to maintain their facade of normalcy. Each point on the scorecard represented a sexual encounter with Melanie, reducing her to a mere object in their grotesque sex game. It was this dehumanizing treatment that ultimately led to her silence, permanently. As the community of Charlottesville grappled with the shock of such a heinous act occurring in their midst, the public watched in horror as the details of the case were laid bare, from the bloodstains in the basement to the disturbing entries in Melanie's diary. The Hartsfelds' motive was clear: to protect their secret at all costs. Their fear of exposure drove them to conspire against Melanie, leading to a brutal act of violence that would end her life and shatter the tranquility of Charlottesville. As the trial approached, legal experts weighed in on the case, speculating on the outcome and the potential sentences. The Hartsfelds faced the possibility of life in prison, a stark contrast to their previous lives of prestige and privilege. The case served as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors, even in the most seemingly idyllic of settings. The police, after a meticulous investigation, pieced together the evidence that pointed unequivocally to the family's guilt in the murder of Melanie Varela. The day of reckoning came when law enforcement officials, armed with irrefutable proof, arrested James, Paula, and Kevin Hartsfeld. The scene was one of stark reality, as the family, once respected members of the community, were handcuffed and taken into custody. The surprise and resignation on their faces were palpable, a stark contrast to their previous academic and social standing. As the news of the arrest spread, local media outlets prepared to broadcast the story, drawing parallels to other infamous family crime sagas. The coverage was thorough, with journalists providing in-depth analysis of the case's impact on the small Virginia town. The victim's family, who had held on to hope from their home in Sherbrooke, Quebec, were now faced with a mix of relief and sorrow. The truth brought closure, but also a deep sense of loss for Melanie, whose aspirations and kindness were remembered by all who knew her. In the solemn halls of the Charlottesville courthouse, the trial of the Hartsfeld family unfolded like a narrative ripped from the pages of a crime thriller, capturing the rapt attention of the area, ensuring that not a single detail of the proceedings would escape the public eye. District Attorney Tina Arundel, known for her prosecutorial acumen, presented the case against the Hartsfelds with precision and clarity. The courtroom hummed on every word as she recounted the sordid details of the relationships between Melanie Varela and each member of the family, painting a picture of a household ensnared in its own web of deceit. Defense attorney Anne-Marie Gooseneck, renowned for her tenacious courtroom strategies, mounted a vigorous defense. She challenged the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that the evidence was circumstantial and the investigation flawed. Her arguments were crafted to sow doubt in the minds of the jurors, but the weight of the evidence was formidable. The prosecution's case was bolstered by the discovery of Melanie's diary, which became the silent witness to the tragedy. It revealed the intimate and exploitative nature of her relationships with James, Paula, and Kevin Hartsfeld, and the existence of a macabre scorecard that documented their encounters. As the trial progressed, the media coverage intensified. Local news outlets like WVIR-NBC 29 featured nightly segments, dissecting each day's testimony and offering expert legal analysis. The case had all the elements of a primetime drama: passion, betrayal, and a quest for justice. The victim's family, who had traveled from Sherbrooke, Quebec, sat in dignified grief, their presence a constant reminder of the life so brutally taken. They listened intently as the prosecution spoke of Melanie's aspirations and her vibrant spirit, now forever silenced. After days of testimony and deliberation, the moment of truth arrived. The jury, having weighed the evidence, found the Hartsfelds guilty on all counts. The sentence was swift and severe, reflecting the gravity of their crimes. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of emotion as the verdict was read. The trial's conclusion brought closure to some, but for others, questions lingered. Had justice been served? Could anything compensate for the loss of a young woman with such promise? The Hartsfeld case would remain a topic of discussion in law schools, on social media platforms like Twitter, and in the quiet conversations of those who call Charlottesville home. As the gavel struck for the last time, the case of Melanie Varela closed, leaving behind a legacy of cautionary tales about the dangers of secrets and the pursuit of truth. The trial, a stark tableau of the consequences of unchecked desire and duplicity, left an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. The aftermath of the Hartsfeld trial left an indelible mark on the community of Charlottesville. The once respected family faced the stark reality of their actions, as the gavel's final echo signified the end of their saga of a world where the pursuit of truth met the darkest human deeds. The police, lauded for their unwavering dedication, continued to serve as guardians of justice, their resolve strengthened by the case's outcome. The victim's family, hailing from the serene town of Sherbrooke, Quebec, embarked on a painful journey toward healing, their quest for closure intertwined with the memory of Melanie's vibrant life and tragic end. As the Hartsfelds began their sentences, the ripple effects of the trial extended beyond the courtroom. In Charlottesville, life slowly resumed its rhythm, but the shadows cast by the trial lingered. The case became a fixture in the town's lore, a cautionary tale of how secrets can unravel the fabric of a family and a community. The story of Melanie Varela and the Hartsfelds would not be forgotten, serving as a somber reminder of the fragility of trust and the price of deception. The case of Melanie Varela's murder sent shockwaves through Charlottesville, Virginia, in June of 1999. This true crime story exposed the depths of human deception and the tragic consequences that ensued. Tom Prinsley, 52 years old, was the well-respected principal of Lexington Christian Academy, a small private school in the heart of Kentucky's affluent suburban neighborhoods. Known for his unwavering dedication to both his work and the community, Tom had a reputation for fairness, kindness, and a passion for education. His love for restoring historic homes was more than a hobby. It was a calling. Over the years, he had meticulously restored several of the area's grand old houses, breathing new life into the historic architecture of Lexington. Tom was married to his second wife, Olive Prinsley, after a bitter divorce from his first wife, whose criminal activities as a drug dealer selling prescription drugs to other soccer moms had brought shame and scandal to the family. Despite this rocky past, Tom had worked hard to rebuild his life, focusing on his two children from his first marriage, Martin, 21, and Bree, 18. However, Tom's professional success came at a personal cost. He was often absorbed in his work, spending long hours at the school and on restoration projects. This dedication made him a somewhat distant husband and father, leaving Olive feeling neglected and unloved. Yet beneath this busy exterior, Tom was unaware of the storm brewing within his own home. Olive, feeling increasingly bored and resentful of Tom's emotional distance, had started a secret affair with his son Martin. This illicit sexual relationship had grown into a dangerous obsession, leaving Olive down a dark path. In the days leading up to his death in early April 2017, the seemingly perfect life Tom had built was about to come crashing down, shattering the peace of the quiet neighborhood he had worked so hard to be a part of. On the morning of April 5, 2017, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Lexington, Kentucky, was shaken by a grim discovery. At around 7:30 a.m., Bree Princely, Tom's 18-year-old daughter, returned home after spending the night at a friend's house. Bree had been out late studying for a big exam at Henry Clay High School, where she was a senior, and had stayed over at her friend's place to avoid the early morning commute. As Bree walked into the living room of her family's historic home, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The room, usually spotless, was in disarray. A chair was knocked over, and there were papers scattered across the floor. Then her eyes fell on the most horrifying sight she had ever seen. Her father, Tom Princely, lying motionless on the floor near the fireplace. His head was covered in blood, and a heavy iron fireplace poker lay beside him, also stained with blood. Bree's heart raced as she froze in shock, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. After a few moments, she managed to pull out her phone and dial 911, her hands trembling as she tried to explain to the operator what had happened. The dispatcher, hearing the fear in Bree's voice, quickly sent emergency services to the scene. When the first responders arrived, Bree was standing outside the house, pale and shaking. She was in a state of shock, unable to speak coherently. The paramedics rushed inside, but quickly realized there was nothing they could do. Tom Princely was already dead. The scene was chaotic, with signs of a struggle, but it was the bloodied fireplace poker that told the story of how Tom had met his end. As Bree was gently guided into an ambulance for medical evaluation, the police began their investigation. The officers on the scene knew they were dealing with more than just a simple burglary gone wrong. The violence of the attack and the staged appearance of the crime scene immediately raised red flags. Bree's discovery of her father's body marked the beginning of a complex and shocking investigation that would soon uncover the dark secrets hidden within the Princely family. The Lexington Police Department arrived swiftly at the Princely residence after Bree's frantic 911 call. It was just after 8:00 a.m. on April 5, 2017, when officers pulled up to the stately historic home, nestled among the horse farms and tree-lined streets that characterized the affluent neighborhood. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, but the peaceful scene outside sharply contrasted with the horror that awaited inside. Detective Frank Mullins, a seasoned investigator with over 15 years on the force, led the team. Known for sharp instincts and meticulous attention to detail, Mullins had seen her share of crime scenes, but something about this one felt off. As she entered the living room, the first thing that struck her was the amount of blood. Tom Princely's body lay near the fireplace, his head caved in by the heavy iron poker that now lay discarded beside him. The room was in disarray, with overturned furniture and papers strewn across the floor, but Mullins noticed that some things didn't add up. The scene appeared to be a botched robbery, with a missing laptop and a few scattered bills suggesting a possible motive. However, Mullins's experience told her that the scene was too staged, too perfect in its chaos. The front door showed no signs of forced entry, and nothing of real value, such as the expensive antique clock on the mantel or the flat-screen TV, had been taken. It was as if the killer wanted the police to believe it was a simple home invasion gone wrong. As the forensic team began their work, Mullins directed them to dust for fingerprints and search for any other evidence that might have been overlooked in the apparent struggle. They used luminol to check for blood that might have been cleaned up, and sure enough, traces were found leading from the living room to the bathroom, indicating that the killer had attempted to wash away some of the evidence. The medical examiner arrived shortly after and confirmed what Mullins already suspected. Tom Princely had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head. The force of the blows suggested a great deal of anger or desperation. Mullins knew this wasn't the work of a random burglar. This was personal. As the investigation continued, Mullins's suspicions grew. The crime scene was too carefully crafted, and the brutality of the attack pointed to someone with a deep-seated motive. The detectives on the scene exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the investigation was going to be anything but straightforward. The peaceful, upscale community of Lexington was about to be rocked by revelations that would expose the dark undercurrents lurking beneath its polished surface. Detectives turned their attention to Olive Princely, Tom's 40-year-old second wife, as their primary suspect in the murder of Tom Princely. Olive was a stay-at-home mother who had always been known for her polished appearance and social grace. She was often seen at local charity events and community gatherings in Lexington, Kentucky. However, beneath her composed exterior, Olive harbored deep insecurities and fears, particularly about her past. Raised in a poor household where food was not a constant, Olive had once worked as an exotic dancer, a fact she kept hidden because of the extremely strict and conservative values of the community she lived in. In Lexington, any hint of scandal could result in severe public backlash, including physical punishment such as whippings for perceived immoral behavior. Olive's fear of her secret being exposed was a significant factor in her life, but when Detective Frank Mullins first questioned Olive, she presented herself as a grieving widow. Her voice trembled as she recounted the events leading up to Tom's death. Olive claimed she had been upstairs sleeping off a bottle of Cabernet when the attack occurred, only discovering the scene when she heard Bree's shrill screams. Olive insisted she had no idea who could have done such a thing, repeatedly emphasizing how much she loved her husband and how shocked she was by his brutal murder. Despite Olive's seemingly genuine grief, Detective Mullins couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Olive's story was just a bit too rehearsed, and her tears seemed to appear on cue. When Mullins asked Olive about her relationship with Tom, Olive admitted they had their problems but insisted they were working through them. She described Tom as a distant husband, but said she had always supported him, even during the difficult times. However, as the police dug deeper, they began to uncover troubling details about Olive's life. A search of her phone records revealed frequent calls and sexually explicit text messages to Tom's 21-year-old son, Martin. The messages were more than flirtatious, and were at times explicitly sexual, detailing their liaisons in graphic detail, raising suspicions that Olive and Martin were more than just family. When confronted with this evidence, Olive's demeanor shifted. She became defensive, insisting that the messages were harmless and that she was simply trying to support Martin through a rough patch. But the police weren't convinced. Olive's growing resentment toward Tom, coupled with her inappropriate relationship with Martin, provided a possible motive for murder. As the investigation continued, Olive's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The police started to view her not as a grieving widow, but as a prime suspect in Tom's murder. The more they learned about her, the more they believed that Olive was hiding something, and that her secret might be the key to solving the case. The second person the police turned their attention to was Martin Princely, Tom's 21-year-old son from his first marriage. Martin had recently moved back home after being expelled from Arizona State University for drunken behavior and making sexual threats toward female students. Despite his charm and good looks, which he had inherited from his father, Martin had a troubled history, perhaps influenced by his birth mother who was a drug dealer. He struggled with finding direction in his life, bouncing from one failed class to another, and had a reputation for getting into trouble. Martin's relationship with his father was strained, with Tom often expressing disappointment in his son's lack of ambition and direction. When Detective Frank Mullins sat down to question Martin, he was cocky and dismissive. He admitted to the police that he had a bleeping complicated relationship with his father, but denied any involvement in Tom's murder. Martin described his father as a strict and often distant figure who freely spanked his kids and had always put work before family. He claimed that Tom's death, while tragic, didn't come as a shock given the stress his father had been under, and suggested it was a suicide. However, Martin's attitude changed when the police brought up his relationship with Olive. Initially, Martin tried to downplay it, claiming that his moo-moo mommy Olive had been supportive during his many rough patches, and was the only mother he had as his birth mother was in prison. But as the questioning continued, it became clear that the relationship was far from some cutesy-inspiring thing. Martin eventually broke down and admitted that he and Olive had been involved in a sexual relationship for several months. He shrugged it off as a casual fling, claiming he was in it for the, quote, free sex, and insisted it was no big deal. Despite Martin's nonchalant attitude, the police saw his relationship with Olive as a potential motive. If Tom had discovered the affair, it could have led to a confrontation, giving Martin a reason to want his father out of the picture. However, Martin maintained that he had nothing to do with Tom's death, and that the affair was just a distraction from his otherwise aimless life. Detective Mullins noted Martin's lack of genuine emotion when discussing his father's death. His cavalier attitude and refusal to take responsibility for his actions only raised more red flags. But without solid evidence linking him directly to the crime, the police couldn't arrest him yet. Still, Martin remained a person of interest, especially given the growing tension between him and Olive, and the volatile nature of their secret affair. The investigation into Tom's murder was far from over, and Martin's role in the case was becoming increasingly murky. The third person the police questioned was Bree Princely, Tom's 18-year-old daughter and Martin's younger sister. Bree had been the one to discover her father's body, and her initial shock had quickly turned into suspicion. She was convinced that Martin had something to do with their father's death. Bree and Martin had never been close, and their relationship had grown even more strained in recent months. Bree was a sharp, independent young woman, set to graduate from high school in just a few months. She was planning to attend the University of Kentucky in the fall, where she intended to study psychology. Unlike her brother, Bree had always been focused and driven, with a clear sense of what she wanted from life. When Detective Frank Mullins interviewed Bree, she found her to be articulate and composed, despite the trauma she had just experienced. Bree was adamant that Martin was involved in their father's murder. She described how Martin had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to Tom's death, frequently arguing with their father and spending more time at home than usual. Bree also mentioned the growing tension between Tom and Olive, though she hadn't been aware of the full extent of their marital problems. Bree's suspicions didn't stop at Martin. She also expressed concern about Olive's behavior, noting that her stepmother had seemed unusually calm in the aftermath of the murder. Bree described how Olive had taken control of the situation, calling the police and informing the neighbors before Bree had even processed what she had seen. To Bree, Olive's actions seemed too calculated, too rehearsed. As the investigation progressed, Bree's own relationship with Olive came under scrutiny. Olive had used her charm and manipulative tactics to exert control over Bree, creating quite the complicated situation. Despite being a victim in many ways, Bree was drawn into Olive's web of deceit. Eventually, Bree became involved in a brief sexual affair with Olive, a fact that came to light during her interviews with police. This relationship was part of Olive's broader attempt to manipulate those around her and maintain control before and after Tom's death. Bree's insights painted a troubling picture of the dynamics within the Princely household. The police began to consider the possibility that both Olive and Martin were involved in Tom's murder, perhaps working together to eliminate him. Bree's testimony added another layer of complexity to the case, suggesting that the murder was the result of a tangled web of family tensions and secret relationships. Despite her strong suspicions, Bree had no concrete evidence to prove Martin's or Olive's involvement. However, her observations provided the police with valuable leads, prompting them to dig deeper into the lives of both Martin and Olive. The investigation was becoming increasingly complicated, with Bree's testimony serving as a crucial piece of the puzzle. On the morning of April 18, 2017, the investigation into Tom Princely's murder took a crucial turn. The weather was unseasonably warm for early spring in Lexington, with clear skies and a light breeze. Detective Frank Mullins was back at the Princely residence, meticulously combing through the living room for anything the initial sweep might have missed. The case had stalled, with no solid evidence tying any of the suspects, Olive, Martin, or Bree, to the crime. But Mullins was determined to find the missing link. As she was about to call it a day, Mullins noticed something odd about the fireplace. The mantel was dusted clean, except for a small, almost imperceptible smear near the base. It was easy to overlook, but Mullins's keen eye caught it. She called in a forensic team to take a closer look. They carefully removed the fireplace poker, which had already been identified as the murder weapon, and began to dust the area for prints. What they found was a partial fingerprint, faint but legible, on the underside of the poker, something that had been missed in the initial investigation. The fingerprint was sent to the lab for analysis, and within hours they had a match. It wasn't Tom's, Olive's, or Martin's. It was Bree's. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Bree had been vocal about her suspicions of Martin and Olive, but now the evidence pointed to her. This new piece of evidence forced the police to reevaluate Bree's involvement in the case. Could she have been more involved than she let on? Detective Mullins was hesitant to jump to conclusions. Bree's prints on the poker could have been left there innocently after all. She lived in the house and could have handled the poker at any time. But the timing was suspicious. Why would Bree's fingerprints be on the murder weapon, especially in such an unusual spot? Mullins' team decided to bring Bree in for another round of questioning. This time, they pressed her harder about her actions on the day of the murder. Bree maintained her innocence, insisting she had nothing to do with her father's death. But her story had small inconsistencies, and the new evidence made it impossible to completely rule her out. As the investigation continued, the police knew they needed more than just a partial fingerprint to build a case. But the discovery had cracked the investigation wide open. Now, with Bree under increased scrutiny, the detectives were more determined than ever to piece together the truth behind Tom Princely's murder. On April 19, 2017, the investigation into Tom Princely's murder took a decisive turn. After the discovery of Bree's fingerprints on the fireplace poker, the police focused their attention back on Olive Princely, Tom's wife. Despite Bree's prints on the murder weapon, something about Olive's demeanor during questioning had never sat right with Detective Frank Mullins. Olive had been too calm, too rehearsed. And then there was the strange relationship with Martin, Tom's 21-year-old son, that kept coming up in interviews. The breakthrough came when police obtained Olive's phone records, which revealed a series of deleted text messages between Olive and Martin in the days leading up to Tom's death. The messages were flirtatious and hinted at a deeper, more troubling relationship. One message from Olive, sent just 2 days before the murder, read, "Soon, it'll just be us, and we can finally be free." Another from Martin, responding, said, "I can't wait. He's in the way." These messages provided a clear motive. Olive wanted to be with Martin, and Tom was the obstacle in their path. The detectives confronted Olive with the evidence. It was April 20, 2017, a bright and sunny afternoon, when Olive was brought into the Lexington Police Department for what would be her final interrogation. The once composed and graceful Olive began to crack under pressure. She denied any involvement at first, but eventually started to unravel as the questioning intensified. Detective Mullins pushed Olive on the inconsistencies in her story and the damning text messages. Olive's calm facade broke, and she began to cry. In a moment of desperation, she confessed, "I couldn't stand it anymore. Tom was suffocating me. I needed to be with Martin. We were meant to be together." Olive admitted to planning Tom's murder, staging it to look like a robbery gone wrong, and even trying to manipulate Bree into taking the fall by planting her fingerprints on the poker. With her confession, the police had everything they needed. Olive Princely, 40 years old, was arrested on the spot for the murder of her husband, Tom. The news of her arrest shocked the community, especially those who knew the Princely family. Tom's children, Bree and Martin, were devastated, with Martin refusing to believe his stepmother could be capable of such a heinous act, despite the evidence. The case had come full circle, and justice was finally within reach. Olive's arrest marked the end of a twisted love triangle that had destroyed a family and left a community in shock. The trial of Olive Princely began on October 15, 2017 in Lexington, Kentucky. The case drew considerable media attention due to the shocking nature of the crime and Olive's seemingly perfect public image. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious locals, and Tom Princely's grieving family. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Helen Morgenstern, a 45-year-old attorney known for her dedication and clear, compelling arguments. Morgenstern outlined Olive's motive in her opening statement, focusing on Olive's secret affair with Tom's son Martin and her desire to be free from Tom's control. Morgenstern detailed how Olive had meticulously planned the murder, staging the crime scene to look like a botched robbery. She emphasized the chilling text messages between Olive and Martin, which revealed their intentions and desire to be together. In contrast, Olive's defense attorney was Robert Hughes, a 52-year-old lawyer known for his calm and methodical approach. Hughes argued that Olive's confession was coerced and that there was insufficient evidence to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He painted Olive as a woman driven to extreme measures by an unhappy marriage and emotional turmoil. Hughes claimed Olive's confession was a result of the intense pressure from the police and her distressed state of mind. As the trial progressed, Tom's family watched with heavy hearts. Bree and Martin were visibly upset, struggling to come to terms with their stepmother's betrayal. Bree's face was often buried in her hands, while Martin appeared numb, still in disbelief that someone he had trusted could commit such a crime. On October 25, 2017, after several days of testimony and deliberations, the jury returned with a verdict. Olive Princely was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as Judge Richard Blake announced the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with mixed emotions. Some felt it was a just punishment for her crimes, while others believed it was too harsh. Tom's family was relieved that justice had been served but remained deeply affected by the loss. The verdict marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Princely family, and Olive's conviction served as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of unchecked desires and deceit. After Olive Princely's conviction, the lives of everyone involved were profoundly changed. The trial's end did not bring an easy resolution for the people affected by Tom Princely's murder. Olive Princely was transferred to the Kentucky State Penitentiary, a maximum security facility known for housing dangerous criminals. Her once glamorous life had come to a stark and unglamorous end. Olive faced the harsh reality of prison life. With its daily routines and stringent rules, she had lost everything she held dear: her freedom, her marriage, and her reputation. Olive's case continued to be a topic of immediate interest, with many newspapers and news stations covering her transition from a community figure to a convicted murderer. Martin Princely struggled to cope with the fallout from the trial, but 21-year-old was left with the painful realization that his actions and relationship with Olive had contributed to a tragedy. He was also dealing with the stigma of being associated with such a high-profile case. Martin tried to move on by seeking counseling and focusing on rebuilding his life, though the shadow of the scandal followed him wherever he went. Bree Princely, Tom's 18-year-old daughter, faced her own set of challenges. The ordeal had taken a toll on her emotionally and psychologically. She was determined to honor her father's memory and avoid letting the tragedy define her. Bree chose to focus on her education and career, hoping that moving forward with her life would help her find some peace. She found solace in speaking out about her experience, participating in local events and discussions to raise awareness about domestic violence and familial betrayal. The Princely family's case remained a sobering reminder of how personal relationships and hidden grievances could lead to devastating consequences. As the months passed, the community began to heal, but the memory of Tom Princely and the impact of Olive's crime lingered as a cautionary tale about the dark side of human nature.